Good morning. I'm Anthony Coghill, Public Safety Chairman and Councilperson of the 4th City Council District. We have with us the Bureau of Police at the table. I'm going to ask Budget Director Peter McDevitt to give us a brief overview. But however, I just want to address and state, we all know by now tragically we lost one of our firefighters last night. Mr. John Walsh, 37-year veteran, who will be deeply missed, and just want to take a moment of silence, if we could, in honor of him. Thank you. Okay, so let's get through our business here with the Pittsburgh Police, and I'm sorry, Mr. McDevitt, if you want to proceed.
Sure, thank you. The mission for the Bureau of Police, through their commitment to professional service to all, the Bureau of Police is a source of pride for our city and a benchmark for policing excellence. The Bureau of Police stands ready to protect human life, serve without reservation or favor, stand as partners with all, and help all communities live free from fear. A quick overview: the Bureau of Police is divided into the Chief's Office and 3 branches: administrative, investigations, and operations, and those are broken down for you below. A quick summary of the positions: there's a total of 875 full-time positions in the operating budget for 2025. That includes 800 uniformed sworn police officers, and there are a number of position swaps that total a savings of about $55,000. And the budget also reflects an effort to rebalance service within the Bureau via civilianization. Overall, there's a decrease of about $1.6 million. And I will also note that premium pay has decreased by $2 million in 2025 in the budget that is projected. A quick summary of non-personnel changes. Overall, there's a $1.45 million increase. That includes $66,000 decrease in professional and technical services, but I will note that there is $100,000 added for a stable hand contracted service. There's $413,000 increase for property services, a $107,000 increase in supplies, and $997,888 increase in property, and that is for an increase in the Axon contract. In the capital budget, there is no deliverable straight to the police bureau, but they do have one through DPW for the police firing range construction for about $4.76 million. And it is also worth noting that the police vehicles are budgeted in the public safety admin budget. Per usual, and this year they have $1.375 million in the 2025 operating budget. There are a couple of trust funds that police have access to: the Police Secondary Employment Trust Fund, which has expenditures for reimbursements to officers for police details, secondary employment, and or special events, as well as any administrative charges relating to these programs. The relevant administrative fees are transferred to the general fund. The Confiscated Narcotics Proceeds Trust Fund, any and all expenses associated with investigation of narcotic violations, including salaries, supplies, materials, and other miscellaneous expenses, proposed in 2015 amendment to include any other law enforcement activities by 2015 ordinance. The Confiscated Non-Narcotics Proceeds Trust Fund is for any and all expenses associated with investigations of non-narcotics violations, including salaries, supplies, materials, and other miscellaneous expenses. The Graffiti Trust Fund, which is used specifically for graffiti abatement, rewards, public awareness, vouchers, and community organizations in support of their graffiti removal programs, and for such other purposes as may be approved by the Director of Public Safety. The Director of Public Safety shall grant rewards of up to the sum of $500 to individuals, organizations, or other entities who provide information leading to the arrest of conviction of any individual for violating Chapter 620.03. And lastly, the Mounted Patrol Trust Fund is used to supplement the operations of the Mounted Police, which is otherwise funded through an annual operated budget. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Mr. McDevitt. And for the record, we're joined by Councilwoman Barbara Warwick. And we also have online, I believe, Council President Daniel Lavelle and and Councilman Bobby Charlin. So with that, I'll turn it over to Public Safety. If you all just introduce yourselves, and if you have any type of presentation, we'll be glad to hear that.
Good morning. My name is Lee Schmidt. I'm Public Safety Director for the City of Pittsburgh.
Good morning, Charles Showers, Manager of Personnel and Finance for the Department of Public Safety.
Good morning, Chris Ragland, Acting Chief of Police.
Thank you, gentlemen. Charles, did you have something you wanted to go over?
Yes, as per usual, we have a brief PowerPoint presentation to share to illustrate some of the accomplishments that we have made this year and go into some more detail about the budget requests. And there we are. Mr. McDevitt has already discussed the overview of the Police Bureau, their goals. For reference, here is our organizational chart. We also have some demographic information. If I don't know if you want to go into any of that at this time. Okay. Some of our accomplishments for the Bureau. I'll defer to the Chief or Director if they want to review any of these.
I'll take any questions on it, but I think they kind of speak for themselves.
All right, and again, a number of strategic initiatives that have continued from last year. And again, just for reference, we include both the 2024 general fund breakdown and the 2025 preliminary budget breakdown. And that brings us to the additions and changes to the 2025 budget that are requested, number of personnel requests and non-personnel requests as mentioned. To clarify a little bit on some of this, the Axon contract is a contractual obligation. That funding was approved whenever the Axon contract was discussed before Council earlier this year. And the Chief, I don't know if you want to go into any of the other details here at the moment here.
I'm happy to answer any questions with respect to any of these as we move forward.
I don't have any questions.
Okay.
Councilwoman, do you have any questions on? No, not just yet, but as far as where we're at, right? You're not through.
Oh, no, we have a few more. We have
Okay,
just a
all
couple
right,
more
all right.
slides here, just
All
to
right,
talk
but-
about some of the good things that
Gotcha,
we've been doing.
Gotcha.
Again, reference to the community engagement that police has been trying to do and improve upon.
So one of the things I would highlight would be the Pittsburgh Police Cares initiative that kind of was started in Zone 1 under Zone 1 Cares. Each individual station has the ability to kind of have their own page, upload stats, provide the neighborhood and the public with the individual officers who are geographically assigned to those areas. And I think that's very important so that people know, who their officer is. And, everything in life is, you accomplish most things by building relationships. And so, that is a priority amongst the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police is to, strengthen those relationships amongst the public and the PPP.
Okay, and we've been working very hard on improving the training and professional development for the officers out there. As you can see, some of the goals for 25, continuing to improve and make more efficient those goals.
Yeah, so one thing I would highlight there this year, we made a priority of providing a career roadmap. I think that helps with retention. If an officer kind of decides, hey, how do I become a detective? How do I become, a homicide detective? And what we have done is put together with the assistance of Chief Devine, a detective school. And I think we put 63 individuals through that, kind of put them through their paces. They get to be ranked. And they have a better understanding of what it takes to be a detective, and so for 2025, I think some of our goals would be to kind of do something similar on the kind of the leadership front and the supervisory front. Usually in police work, it takes two paths. You kind of have the investigative front, or you want to become a supervisor. And I think we can do a better job than we have in the past with kind of developing those leaders and the future leaders of the organization.
Okay, that's actually our last slide. Went through that fairly quickly, but there's happy to take any questions or return to any of those slides if any questions from council.
Okay, Charles, thank you, gentlemen. We could start with online. Whoever we have, Councilman Bobby Charland, if he would like to go first. Councilman Charland, you with us?
Yes. Thank you, Councilman. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, perfect. I want to thank Public Safety and Chief Ragland for being here. I wanted to start off with asking about the graffiti team that you mentioned. So graffiti is a huge issue in my district, but all throughout the city. And for the longest time, we did have the graffiti busters team. And I'm curious if that is something that we are looking to reestablish, or if that's something that we can learn how to work through.
So that is mostly a DPW and PLI function with support from police for any investigative needs around, consistent issues or tagging or hate speech, that sort of thing. But that is a group that still exists. Those contracts are in place. It's just a matter of making the 311, and then PLI takes the photos, checks for codes, and then DPW engages and has the folks, either they clean it themselves or paint over it themselves, or they have the contracted vendors do that. The police bureau, as I said, supports it through with their detectives in each zone, or if it needs to rise to the level of the investigations branch.
So, from my perspective, or from residents' perspective, how do I initiate the police investigation into that? Is it going through DPW, or is it going through starting with the police? How should I work with that? It used to be that I reach out to Detective Sloan, but I know that isn't the case anymore.
So, Councilman, you can do that one of two ways. The individual, if they own the property, obviously you can call 911. We will take a report. We will send out a Axon community request to that individual for video or photos, and then that'll get routed to the zone where it occurred, where the commander will assign it to their plain clothes. If you see kind of like graffiti on a mailbox, and you can still call 911, but 311 would also be appropriate. Those 311 complaints do get routed to the zones, and we would then coordinate with DPW.
So I have found, which it's definitely been true when I was a staffer, but in this year it has become more glaring. We are very bad as a city whenever two departments need to talk to each other. It seems to be one of our biggest weaknesses. Well, is that a strong connection? Is there someone whose job it is to make that connection? Because I find that a lot of requests from one department to another, get ignored or not prioritized.
I don't think it's anyone's specific job. I think in the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police, each of the commanders to strive to have good relationships with the other departments within the city of Pittsburgh. If you think that we're not doing that, appropriately, or we need to do that better, I will certainly take that feedback, and I will have conversations with my commanders, and I'll have the conversation with Director Hornstein to see how we would improve that.
Okay, I definitely appreciate that, and I think that this is something that I mentioned to Director Hornstein as a request that we got, but it might be beneficial for us to have a briefing on graffiti and with the two departments there to understand what to do moving forward here. I wanted to ask about premium pay and overtime. So I am concerned about where we are in the budget with that in your expenditures category here. Can you talk to us a little bit about your plan with premium pay and how we're going to get by with $2 million less?
So this past February, we kind of in earnest utilized a timekeeping software, and I think that provides a better picture to what we're paying overtime with. And in fact, I think like just today, it allows us to put the officers' rates in, and we can almost track. Utilizing the system correctly, we can almost track down to the minute and penny of what we're spending money on. So I think that gives us a much more clearer picture. I think before we were using 2 or 3 different systems to kind of track that pay, and my desire is to kind of combine our secondary employment system, make that talk to our timekeeping system, so that we certainly can make better informed choices on what we utilize our overtime pay on.
So, I mean, the way that I would see our overtime going down would be that we would have more regular time shifts happening. But also that pay is going down as well. That pay is going down, I think, $1.6 million. So I'm just not sure how we square that with both regular pay and premium pay going down. And I understand that it could be, an advantage of software being in there, but in 2023, we were $4.5 million over where we're going to budget next year in terms of overtime. So, is the software really going to be able to make up for that gap? Again, considering that regular pay is going down.
Well, that's certainly a concern, but what I would say is that we have had difficult time tracking in the past, some overtime decisions, and so I think moving forward, this provides a better and clearer picture, very real-time picture of what we're spending our money on, and so I would say that that certainly is a concern, but I think that we have a better picture moving forward of what we're spending our money on.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think this is this is one of the more glaring holes to me that I think we need to figure out if we are going to pass this budget. I don't know how we're being honest with ourselves if this is what we think these numbers are actually. You mentioned the we've talked a lot about the civilianization of officers. Can you talk to me and talk to the public a little bit about your views on civilianization of roles in the PvP and where we see those likely to happen, where we are in hiring those individuals, and what you think that will look like moving forward?
So I think there's opportunity within the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police. We spend, about 6 months training individuals to be police officers. We do a very good job of that. They spend 3 months in field training. And, what we have done in the past is we have, kind of taken a job of a police officer and said, you're a police officer, but now you're also doing something that, does not require arrest powers. And so I think, if you look at any other major city police department, it's probably, somewhere around the 25% range that they have non-sworn personnel within that Bureau of Police, within their police department. And I think there's opportunity for us to kind of increase our non-sworn that does not require police powers. We can, train them in a much quicker fashion. They do not have to have arrest powers, but they can also, kind of handle some of the, functions that don't require an individual to have, arrest powers. So I think there's any number of positions within the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police that we can take that opportunity and move a police officer, from that position and put them back out into the street amongst the public where, they would need to use their arrest powers.
I like this idea. I think that it's very much appreciated when I've talked to, my community members at community meetings, the idea of whatever we can do to get more officers on the street. And if that requires civilianizing, more roles, I think that's something I'm supportive of. So I'm glad to hear that that's something that you also are working for. In this budget, what roles are we looking to add that are civilianized, and where are we currently with the previously budgeted civilianized positions?
So in this budget, can you just bring up this slide? Sorry. We do have some positions that we're looking to consider adding civilians to support the police work too. That would be property and evidence room technicians, the real-time crime center specialists, which we currently have 1. This would expand it to 6. And then 6 police service aides, which would be folks that kind of handle some of the work of a front desk officer. But we do, we're careful about, we're not replacing any police officers. We still want to maintain the same number of officers, a higher number of officers than we currently have. And we have civilians in the right positions doing work that makes sense for a civilian to do, and our officers out on the streets doing that work. The current budget does allow for 12 community service aides. We have recruited those and hired a few. They just started Monday. And again, that's the same sort of thing as the chief alluded to. There's work that can be done that doesn't require a police officer, that we currently have civilians doing some of it over the phone, but this is for them to go out and engage with the community, talk to the public, not necessarily enforce laws, but be more the face of the Bureau, talking to them, talking to the department. But we still have to work within the confines of the FOP contract around that. And
I apologize. I realize I probably was not as precise as I should be with my language. But I do understand we are not replacing officers. We are supplementing the officers. And apologize for speaking imprecisely there.
yeah, I just wanted to make sure that clarity was there. I don't want anybody to think we're using civilians instead of officers. This is simply to free officers from doing administrative work, things that civilians are more apt to do and more effective doing, and so that allows the officers to do the police work, to be out in the community, to be engaging with folks, and not to be behind the desk as often.
I appreciate that. I think that all members, agree with this. But, I can say that we are are fortunate that in our positions we are tasked with going citywide and campaigning. And the big thing that I learned as I was knocking doors last year was just that how often people really want to talk to me about, I want to see more officers on the street, more officers out of their cars, more officers walking around and walking a beat. And I know that we won't be able to get there until we get staffing numbers to a place that we're comfortable about. But I do want to ask the chief, is that a goal for you? Do you want to see more officers getting out of their cars, walking the streets and walking the beats, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely, Councilman. I think that's crucial. That's why I mentioned earlier about the Pittsburgh Police Cares initiative. I want individual officers who are assigned to geographic regions to know the who, what, when, where, and why, and in their actual neighborhoods, and so they can build those relationships. You have someone you can talk to, and information gets shared in a face-to-face manner. So yes, that's absolutely a priority.
I can't think of anything that's more important than that. I often joke that you could not know you live in the city of Pittsburgh. A lot of people don't know where municipal boundaries are, don't really care. But the two things that touch everyone and let them know that the franchise of the city is here is our environmental service workers and our police. And whatever we can do to encourage more movement, to get more officers out of those police vehicles and onto the street, for whatever reason, that would certainly benefit all of us. On that note, one of the things that we have had discussed in previous iterations has been, while we can't get all of the officers walking the beat in all of our neighborhoods, to be a skilled Army Ranger to climb the hills of Beachview and Brookline, we have talked about getting officers onto electric bicycles. Is that something that we're still looking to do?
Yeah, I think we bought 30 of those. I think we have probably over 20 trained. Most of them are in the downtown region, but as I would agree with you that there are a lot of hills in various parts of the city, and if we can utilize them and have the officers utilize them, I'm all for that as well.
Is that an initiative to get more officers into that, outside of downtown?
So I think we're offering up another class. So, I'm not sure I would require or force someone into that unit, but we certainly are welcoming them and giving them that opportunity to, be a bicycle trained officer.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I can, I would like to encourage that. Again, there's something about the four walls of a vehicle that creates a barrier between an officer and the public, and just really like to try to break that down the best we can. Speaking of mobility, or alternative mobility, I guess, I wanted to talk to you about the mounted unit and what you see the future of that unit to be, and where perhaps we could look for some additional efficiencies here.
So are you asking me what the vision is for 2025 or beyond, or my personal opinion of the unit?
Yeah, kind of all three.
So I think the mounted unit has some very dedicated officers who do a very good job. I think that the horses have a tremendous value for community engagement. I believe that their usefulness is beyond reproach when it comes to crowd management. The unit has some challenges with respect to resources. And the city of Pittsburgh has some challenges with respect to resources. And so, like, we need to figure out either how to, resource that unit to its fullest extent or look for some other options.
So, if we were to look to a pathway towards disbanding the mounted unit, what kind of cost savings would that create for us?
So I think currently it would free up 2 officers who are there like full time. I don't believe we pay anything for the lease of that facility. However, there is some capital cost that is going to need to be done with that facility if we continue to use it. There is some equipment that a couple trailers, some trucks that are associated with such. I mean, off the top of my head, I couldn't give you that. I'd be happy to research that and provide you to that at a later time. But there certainly would be some diversion of costs.
Yeah, I could answer a little bit of that. The estimated costs annually for that unit that we have right now is approximately $500,000 when you count officer salary, overtime, the feed, maintenance, veterinarian services for the horses, and then just general maintenance of the facilities. There is a small amount to the lease, but the property owner's been pretty gracious on that, and has kind of been donating that to us mostly now. But the upkeep, maintenance, vehicles, all that stuff, the unit in that program itself, the estimated annual cost is about $500,000.
And Chief Serrato explained some pretty inefficient things in terms of the trailer, the parking, or the driveway, I guess, and kind of a need for an officer to have a CDL to move the horses. I just if this unit has a lot of utility, then I think we need to address some of those things. And if it doesn't, I can think of a lot of other ways that your department could spend $500,000. So, okay. I also wanted to talk while we're here about the crime rates. So, where are we in terms of fatal shootings in 2024?
So I believe we're at 41 versus 45 from last year. And I think as far as non-fatal shootings, if I remember correctly, it was like 118 last year at this time, and I think we're in the 70 range. So there's a significant decline in non-fatal shootings. But I think if you ask anybody in the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police, our goal would be to have 0 homicides.
Yeah. What is the plan to continue reducing the non-fatal shootings, and I guess what is the plan to reduce fatal shootings?
So I think the partnership and the initiatives that we have in place, have been kind of proven fruitful. Between outreach, our investigative unit, clearing homicides, our zone officers, and our violence prevention unit being visible and preventing homicides. I think that what you have seen is like those efforts have kind of proven valuable. I think moving forward, we want to kind of double down on that. My desire would be to, work with Reverend Cornell Jones, kind of, I don't want to say revitalize, but kind of work towards that group violence intervention model, where we have certainly identified individuals who have either been victims of crime or we believe have perpetrated crime, and kind of interject ourselves into that individual's life, and kind of let them know that they kind of have a couple different options, and there's some good ones and there's some bad ones, and let them make that decision. So I think the short answer is that we continue the course we are, and we work towards improving that.
But so tell me, when you say work towards improving that, does that mean additional resources? Does that mean additional emphasis? Does that mean changes in personnel? What does that look like?
So I think it looks like us just kind of just improving. I don't know if we have identified, we truly have individuals that we can identify that we should be reaching out to. And so I think moving forward, I certainly would want our intelligence unit, our violence prevention unit, our zone officers, those are the ones on the boots on the ground, know who the individuals are that are perpetrators of violence, sharing that information with our outreach and group violence coordinators, and kind of again interjecting ourselves into those individuals' lives.
I just, is there something tangible that we can grasp onto that is going to change, that I can talk to the public about? I have to be honest that a lot of the GVI conversations that I have with residents, people are skeptical of GVI programs, and I understand part of that is that it's tough to quantify incidents that don't happen. And I know that the GVI model has moved a lot towards looking at contacts made as opposed to looking at outcomes. But what tangibly can I say that the city of Pittsburgh is going to do differently, to make people more safe?
So I'll take some of this, and I know you're aware of this, council person. Currently in the Hilltop, we're piloting a program where we do more than just track contacts, but we're actually tracking the contacts and then the outcome of each of those. We're trying to use, system build-outs to ensure that everything is in place from start to finish between the GVI model, the police, DHS and their outreach teams, our own outreach teams, and then just general social services, so that then we can identify where our largest gaps are, to when we have the folks that are in these vulnerable situations, or the population that often will commit violence because of community trauma, generational trauma, the behaviors they engage in. There are folks that they don't see another way to make money other than to sell drugs. So how do we get them on a path to success rather than their only income is illegal activity? What we've seen in the past is all these different programs tend to operate, like many things in government, unfortunately, in silos, right? So the strategy we're working in the Hilltop has been proving fairly effective. It's a very small pilot right now. We're looking to get some funding to expand that. We are also partnering with the University of Pittsburgh on a grant in which they will study the effectiveness of our programs. So we're not just throwing things at the wall, so to speak, and hoping it sticks or seeing what sticks. and we're using as our main metrics, not homicide specifically. I know that tends to be what people focus on in the media and even in the community, but we are using all of our shooting as a whole, because I think all of us know the difference between a fatal shooting and a non-fatal shooting is oftentimes, if our EMS,
Right.
the only part of that we can control is our EMS responding quickly, our medics, our firefighters, getting that person to the hospital, et cetera. But there's times it's beyond our control. So the best metric is overall looking at our shootings. We have seen a significant decline in shootings overall, as we stated, but I am very big on data-informed approaches, making sure that we're not just trying things without following up, making sure those systems are in place. Hope that helps answer your question somewhat, and I'm more than happy to give you a little more in-depth on that program anytime.
I mean, I just, I do agree with you that there is, as a way to measure our success, I don't know that there's an importance in drawing a distinction between fatal or non-fatal shootings. But I do, I am skeptical of the program in the Hilltop. I want to see it succeed. I'm not sure it is at a place where I can explain this to residents and explain that this is something that is tangibly different in the way that we're, approaching public safety here. I want to move from the from shootings, which I think are a very separate category, to burglaries or property crimes, car break-ins, those type of crimes. Can we talk about where we are this year as opposed to last year or the year previous, in terms of the nonviolent crimes, I think is the classification you use for it?
Councilman, I apologize. I don't have those numbers in front of me right now. I can get them to you. I can get them to you as soon as I get back to the office.
Yeah, I think that, in terms of discussing where we are as a department and justifying the tactics and the expenses, I think those are things that we do need to see and need to be made public and available as best as possible. All right, I'm going to let other members go. I know that I went on for a while here. I might have some more things as we come back. But thank you for being here, and thanks for talking to me online. I know it's hard to have a conversation with a person who's not in front of you, so appreciate that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Charlin. Let the record be shown we have Councilman Mosley also who joined us online. Is that correct? Yeah. And I would like to go probably to Council President. I know he's been online for a while. So if Mr. President, if you have any questions, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Councilman Charlin actually touched on all the topics I was going to inquire about, so I don't really have much to add, although sort of a clarifying question. When we were talking about the premium pay, that was initially a big concern for me, actually. But just help me clarify if I'm mistaken in any way. Part of the reason why it's projected to go down is that we're bringing on additional officers who are actually at a lower pay rate, therefore lessening the burden of more seasoned officers who are at the sort of a premium rate doing that overtime work, which helps reduce that cost. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, Councilman, that would, as our force increases, I think you all are aware we have about 40 recruits in currently that just started recently, plus a couple other recruit classes coming out. So as they get into the field as full-time officers or full-fledged officers, that they'll be picking up some of that over time. As the chief stated, we'll also be using the software. And additionally, if we look through our budgets currently, I know there was a question about the current base pay as well as premium pay. Base pay has gone down, but we are significantly this year under budget on base pay. And based on where we forecast our manpower to get to, we're doing a significantly more amount of recruitment as we were before, and we're going to continue to strive to do better with recruitment. But since we are still not at the full number of allotted by budget, which is 850 this year and 800 next year, we're not even near there. That general base salary has a significant savings that we're currently under by.
To date, the regular salary is under budget by about $17.8 million.
Yeah. So realistically, to move that from there, and then lower premium pay because of the increase in the officers, we can do that. I do also want to note for folks, as they look through the budget, I know it can get a little confusing, but when we talk about officers, first-year officers are not included in that 850 number. They are not included in the 850 or the 800 until they are in their second year on the force, and they are PO2s. So when we count officers in the academy, when we count officers in their first year and in field training, they are not part of that 800 budgeted number. They are in a separate category in the budget. So just want to clarify that for folks as well.
Thank you. You all spoke about the civilian positions. I'm a huge supporter of that approach. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to sort of visit the Baltimore Police Department, and they had begun using more civilians. And in theirs, it was mostly on the phone. So someone was reporting a breaking and entering, or someone stole something out of my car. They were taking that information and then ultimately providing it in real time to officers on the street. So I think that's a great move on you all's part. So I just want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for speaking towards getting more officers on motorcycles. I do know that's a concern for a number of my colleagues on council. So thank you for that. And then lastly, at the end of you and Councilman Charlin conversation, you were talking about sort of the distinction between fatal and non-fatal. And I do think it does matter somewhat because of the systems in place around it. And so one question for you, because it's not up this year, but I believe it may be up next year if memory serves me correct. One of the reasons, in my opinion, tell me if you think I'm wrong, the distinction between fatal and non-fatal matters is because we now have the shot spotter system more throughout our city, which allows in real time for our EMS and often our fire department now to be on the scene quicker than ever, which also helps towards the non-fatal portion of shootings. Is that correct?
Yeah, I agree, and maybe I should clarify. It's not that we don't care about the difference between them, but when we're looking at the impacts of how we are impacting violence itself and the occasion of violence, we look at that as a whole. We kind of count those together because both of those are violent acts that could easily cause death. But for our response purposes, yes, and for obviously for offenses and things like that, it is very important to make a distinction between fatal and non-fatal. It's more around how we impact those programs. We're focused on trying to reduce the violence acts rather than trying to determine what causes homicides or not for that aspect of the programs, if that makes more sense or a little clearer there. But I agree, there is a huge difference between a fatal and a non-fatal, and we do have to track that as far as, which is part of what our EMS does. They have an excellent rate of, I believe it's 97, 98% save rate for shooting victims, which is much higher than the national average. That is with the support of our police and the initial interventions they provide, as well as our fire bureau, and then obviously our EMS is the most critical part of that, providing that care to any folks injured.
So Councilman, just to kind of piggyback on the director, our non-fatal shootings are down 34% this year versus last year, and I think that speaks kind of volumes as well. Like 34 less incidents of someone firing a gun and hitting someone. So I think that certainly, I don't want nobody's taking a victory lap, but we certainly are proud of that.
Understood. Also, Chief Ragland, when you all were talking sort of about the GVI model, as I heard you talking about understanding who is actually out there sort of perpetrating the crime, knowing that it's a very small percentage who are very instrumental in a large portion of crime within the city. To me, it sounded, if I heard you correctly, that you were sort of referring to the call-in method, which is one portion of the sort of the GVI intervention. And many years ago, when we attempted that, I think part of what we discovered was we didn't have all the systems built out, so that we had sort of the stick, which was we're going to call you in, we know who you are, we can identify you, but we didn't have enough of the carrot. But now, with sort of the full model being built out, we now actually have the services in place that, yes, we can identify that individual, but now we can also provide, here's all the resources, here's the tools, here's the means by which we can help you escape. Did I hear you correct in sort of saying that you want to use that approach?
Yeah, absolutely, Councilman. I think that's a very directed approach. I would agree with your assessment that incidents of violence are driven by a small number of individuals, and if we can certainly identify those and have those call-ins, I think that makes a difference. And I think it moves the needle further down.
Okay. Thank you. That was all for me, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate it. I believe Councilman Kahari Mosley is online as well, and I would like to offer you the floor, Mr. Mosley, if you're there still and have some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like the Council President, said that our esteemed colleague Councilman Charlotte, asked a lot of questions that came to mind for me. But I just have at least a couple questions, and I jumped in, midstream. So I apologize if this has been covered. But before I jumped into the meeting, but my first question comes to mind around recruitment, and there's been obviously a lot of conversation, citywide about the number of officers that we have in the bureau. Right now, given the current schedule of the academy, this time next year, how many more officers do we expect, to have on the force, and when do you see, given the current schedule of recruitment and academy classes, when do you think that we'll be, back closer, to that 800 number, that 850 number?
So I think you have a couple different buckets. You have recruitment, and then you have also retention. And so on the recruitment side, we obtained a grant that lets us kind of focus in, and some of the feedback that we have heard is that when we used to recruit, we used to fish. We used to just kind of toss our line in the water, and we wait for someone to nibble on it. That model across the country has become a lot different, and so now it's almost hunting. So we have identified what we want in police officers, and so we will kind of target those individuals who may have an affinity towards that, and proactively recruit them. In that grant, I think there's opportunity for us to do just that. And so we also are working on our processes. So if, by the time you take the test to the time you enter the academy, that might be a 6-month time span. And I think that there's opportunity for us to kind of lessen that with certain software systems that we've worked with HR with. Additionally, I think we want to move to a model that, where the academy, in the past, we used to wait till we got an X number of recruits to put an academy class on. So, if you were first on the list, like, we couldn't give you a date of when that academy would start. So I think we want to move to a model where we have, a kind of a 2 times a year academy. And so when, you pass the test and you start through the process, we can say, you're going to start the academy on this date. And so I think, through the combination of all of those different things, we're working very diligently to increase our numbers. And I think we're having some success.
Thank you for that, Chief. My next question, is about another issue that has been covered, around, the lowering, of the homicide rate, as well as, the rate of incidents, of gun violence. Can you talk a bit about, Chief, as well as Public Safety Director as well, if you want to chime in, as far as what, specific tactics and things that you attribute, to that drop, in the incidents, and what, we can build on, not only, as the public safety element of city government, but, as stakeholders, citywide, and continuing to support, those tactics and things that have contributed, to that drop.
So I think it's a combination of things. So I think on the uniform side, it's having, officers, the same officers in the geographic areas, visible, present, making contact, knowing the who, what, when, where, developing relationships, and sharing of information. On the investigative front, I think we have done a very good job utilizing some of the tools that we have with respect to cameras, with respect to business cameras, with respect to just interviewing skills to clear some of those homicides. So it's certainly a team effort. We always want to prevent, but we also want to make sure that if you are going to perpetrate violence in the city of Pittsburgh, that you are not going to be able to walk the streets freely.
Thank you for that, Chief. Director Smith, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think Chief covered it well. I mean, that is part of what we're doing with the programs that I mentioned earlier, is focusing on how we determine which is the most effective courses and what combination of courses might be the most effective. We can all sit and surmise what could have caused things to go up or down, but without actually researching it, it's difficult. So that's kind of where we are with it right now, is continuing to look at that to make sure the programs we have are effective, but obviously they are. We just have to figure out how we can improve them even more.
And Councilman, I'd be remiss if I didn't also kind of give some of that credit to any number of outreach groups that we partner with. Sometimes they receive information from the communities, from the streets that don't come to us directly, and they're that conduit to provide us that needed intelligence to be somewhere before something happens. So I was remiss by not crediting them in that decline as well.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that, and that kind of was a great segue. So more than likely be my final question today is that interplay, between the uniformed officers and as well, from the police bureau and the nonprofit violence intervention groups, many of who receive support from the Stop the Violence Fund. Can you talk, Chief, a bit, about the value that those organizations bring to the table, as well as specifically how that interplay works? How do that collaboration between those nonprofits that are doing grassroots work in the community and working in conjunction with the uniformed officers?
They're on the team. We all want the same goal. We all want, safe streets. We all want to be able to walk without the fear of violence, and so they're part of the team. Each commander is intimately familiar with their outreach coordinator. I am in constant touch with Cornell Jones, and it's about relationship building. You don't get things done without being able to trust each other, and I think we have come a long way, and I think that there is certainly a level of trust between officers on the street, supervisors in the street, the investigators, and the outreach people. So I appreciate the work that they do.
Thanks so much, and I appreciate the work that you all do as well. I think that exhausts my questions, Chairman. I thank everyone for coming today and sharing your insights.
Thank you, Councilman Mosley. Do we have anybody else online, Peter? Okay, so let's go to the in-person people, and I would like to start with Councilwoman Barbara Warwick.
Thank you. So thanks everyone for being here, and really thank you for all the work that you do. When I came into this job, I was not, I was someone who is skeptical of the, law enforcement in general, and I really have to say that over the past couple of years, I've had nothing but positive experiences working with our law enforcement teams, with Zone 4 and others. So I can't say enough good things. And that's, whether it's commanders, chief, officers on the ground that I've met, it's just, everyone's just been really wonderful. So I did want to start with that. It seems like a lot of good work has been done in the past. So as far as the drop, so remind me, so it's a 30-some% drop in homicides and a 44% drop in non-fatal shootings over the past 2 years, is that?
I don't have the 2-year numbers. I think it's a 15% drop in homicides from year to date to 24,
Okay.
year to date 23, and I think it's a 34% drop in non-fatal shootings.
So 15% drop in, okay, so that's over the past year. That's really, I think that's remarkable. I mean, gun violence is just the plague of big cities like Pittsburgh and sort of the country as a whole. But one thing I did want to ask is, and I know that is, your work together with OCHS and our violence interruption programs. So, congratulations on that. I did want to ask with that, could you talk a little bit about guns that are stolen from cars? Is that something, I feel like I heard that once, that is an issue of people leaving their gun in their car, like their gun that they legally have, leaving it in their car, and then people breaking into the car and then getting.
That is certainly an issue. It happens way more frequently than we would like.
Okay.
I don't necessarily think that's responsible gun ownership, but because you have a firearm in a car, sometimes you leave it under the seat, and car thefts happen and car break-ins happen. So that is an issue. I don't have numbers in front of me to kind of give you that, but I can always obtain those for you if you'd like.
Okay. That's I'd be curious. That maybe seems like something we could address as council members. At any rate, so I also wanted to just give a huge thank you to the whole department for the work that you have done surrounding sort of international issues that have been facing the city, with regards to, dealing with international issues or national issues when it comes to protests and whatnot at the city level can be challenging. We have seen, in the past, things have not always gone so well. And I think that, given the turmoil that we've seen in the world, the handling of that here in Pittsburgh, I think really has been stellar from the point of view of law enforcement. And especially, I want to give a huge shout out to Zone 4 and the work that they have done to both respond to anti-Semitic incidences in the Jewish community and also just being a presence in the community to try and help folks feel safer going to temple and whatnot during the holidays.
No, thank you.
Yeah, so Commander Vinansky is just, he's wonderful to work with, and I cannot say enough good things about the work that he's doing and everyone at Zone 4. So our officers did see a pay raise this past year, correct, with the new contract? Do we know, I know we're trying to get there, but where we are kind of in comparison to the surrounding boroughs in terms of pay, just competitive pay?
Yeah, so this is, we're in the third year of the contract, I think?
Second year of
Yeah.
second year of a 3-year contract.
Yeah. Sorry, I have a lot of
25
contracts.
25 being the third year.
Right. So we are still lower than some of the suburbs. We're much closer. We will be negotiating the next contract in the middle, starting in June or so of next year, maybe sooner. But we are looking at what we can do to support our officers and make sure we're competitive to maintain and recruit. I mean, that's obviously a key part of recruitment and retention for all of our bureaus.
And then as far as the new discipline matrix, sort of that like standardizes what the, how to handle any kind of misconduct, do we have any feedback around that, or is our officers on the ground, is that helping folks sort of understand better?
Well, I think it's always important to kind of be consistent and kind of know, let everyone know the rules of the game before the game starts. I think that when you have, or you're inconsistent and individuals aren't aware, that creates a lot of anxiety. And so I think having that available certainly helps, and it certainly kind of maybe puts some anxiety to rest. But we're working through that as we speak. So.
Okay, good. I mean, I do definitely want to underscore how important it is to have that standardization and to have that clarity around conduct, both for our officers who are doing the right thing, right, and for and I do think it is the occasional incidents of them doing the wrong thing. But we did see, an $8 million settlement for the Jim Rogers suit. That was significant, right? That is a significant hit to our budget, so it's something to consider. So I'm glad to see that matrix in place. As far as the telephone reporting unit for non-urgent issues, I am a supporter of this. I'll say I've spoken to a few sort of, patrol officers and whatnot, and heard some of the stories about the things that they get called for, right? I myself was once in a restaurant and saw an officer get called for like a dispute over the check. Right, like someone they didn't like the food, and then the restaurant called the police, and it was not a good use of that officer's time. So do we know yet, I know it's a little bit new, but do we know yet sort of what kind of time savings we're looking at through, by having this telephone reporting for non-urgent issues?
So they take about 47% of the police reports for the city.
Okay.
So it's certainly we could probably run a time study with respect to like what that looks like.
Yeah.
Because officers, I did ask our analysts before this meeting to kind of say, are we spending the same amount of time on calls that we were prior? And that answer is yes. But the officers in the field are taking a lot less of those reports, and more of those reports are being taken by I think we have like 11 people assigned to TRU. If we were to expand that a little bit more, I think there's opportunity for us to, take more of those reports.
Okay. Yeah, so, obviously this is a budget hearing, so I just kind of wanted to kind of highlight the good work that's been done over the past year and previous years. But so, now when it comes to the budget, this is always, so the 2025 operating budget for the Police Bureau is $120 million or so, correct? And the city's total operating budget is like $665 million and change. I do just want to underscore for the public that, the percent of the city's operating budget that goes to the Police Bureau is 18.15%. That's a lot. That's just under 20% of, and just to sort of compare, all four of our DPW bureaus are 10.7% of the budget, and the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure is 2%. Okay, so it's a lot, right? We're paying a lot of money for and it's a critical function, but it is something that we're paying lots for. Capital budget is similar, and this is where I'm going with this. With our capital budget for police is about 4.7% of our capital budget, as compared to, for example, our neighborhood traffic calming program, which is 0.8%, right? So we're paying a lot for police services. We are looking at a couple of years of austerity in front of us. So, we really do need to be spending on programs that are directly improving public safety. Councilman Charlin touched on the mounted unit. That is something that I've also been taking a look at. The numbers I have are that we, 15,200 for veterinary services, about 100,000 for stable hand services, about 25,000 for food and saddles and all that stuff, and then of course 2 full-time officers that are getting a certain amount of overtime to care for the horses. And as Director Schmidt said, sort of all comes together to about $500,000 a year. But I would say that those 2 officers, they are, I wouldn't necessarily count that as like budget, but it's more, person power that can go elsewhere. So the other thing that came up was ShotSpotter. I know, so we pay about $1.2 million a year for ShotSpotter. I know that there are other cities that are questioning, right, the efficacy of ShotSpotter. We've seen a number of cities around the country end their contracts. The Controller Heitzler is doing an audit right now, my understanding is, of the ShotSpotter program. So that is good. I think that will be informative. And I know that in Carrick we've expanded it. So I'm hoping that that's going to provide the kind of apples to apples comparison over whatever, like a year or so. So that'll be good, just so at least that we can better understand how well that technology is working for us. So we'll have some numbers behind that we don't currently have. So as far as the community policing, and I love that our resource officers come to our community meetings and stuff. That's super, that we have officers come to events and parades. But I do want to echo Councilman Charlin's concerns about, officers out in the community, right, on a regular basis. Do we know, can you tell me how many patrol officers we have who are actually out, in cars?
Total assigned. So there are 110 master police officers, and there are 298 officers. Now, again, some of those officers are assigned to non-patrol functions, such as the academy, but that would kind of give you a number.
So I guess I don't understand. The master police officer, is that like
That's just a
patrol?
designation. That's just a designation. If they have 15 years of service, they become a master police officer. It's a little bit of a pay bump.
Okay, what would just be a rough number of like officers whose the bulk of their job is to be on patrol in some form or another, even if they do something, some of the time, but
My grade school teacher will not be happy I'm using a calculator, but I would say 408.
408, okay. So,
That's just police officers. That doesn't include the sergeants
Okay.
that are in patrol.
okay. So, I do want to say, we have 90 neighborhoods in Pittsburgh, right? And, I would like to see, so twofold. One is just, again, like officers out and about, whether that's stopping in business districts and saying hi to the businesses, getting to know people, especially stopping by the after-school programs. I think that is really critical, right? So that we have, whether it's coming by the sports practices or coming by, the just after-school programs in our rec centers, so that for our youngest residents, that first interaction or many interactions that they're having with law enforcement is positive, as opposed to, just to try and build that trust at a young age.
You and I are on the same page.
Okay, good. And again, I understand, right? It's not, there's calls and things, there's other things that officers are going to be doing, but, in those after-school hours, right? That 3:30 to 5:30 window. Being around, available for in the neighborhoods where our young people are, right, would be great. The other thing I want to talk about is traffic enforcement. I know we've talked a lot about this. I'm thinking we have, is it 20 or so deaths from crashes per year? I think that's...
I don't have that number.
Yeah. Well, so I guess I would like to start, I would like it if we could start looking at reckless and unsafe driving as violence in the same way that we look, right? Because that is something I know it's an issue in since I've been on council, there have been 2 children killed by cars, and one nearly killed that I know of. There may be more. Does feel like we have these crashes with pedestrians and cyclists all the time, and we're paying a lot of money to slow the cars down with physical infrastructure. But when we talk about our Vision Zero initiative, it really is. It's 3 parts, right? It's education, infrastructure, and enforcement. So as far as the enforcement goes, can you talk to me, explain a little bit, I guess I don't understand why the sort of cycles versus cars. Do they have to be on cycles to do?
No. Any of the sworn police officers can enforce traffic laws.
Okay, and are they all trained?
Yes.
So they're all trained to do enforce traffic laws. So with the speeding, can you explain it? Because I know we have sort of an archaic way due to state regulations to with painting lines and stuff.
Yeah, so we paint lines, you use a stopwatch, and you have to click a stopwatch when the front tires hit the one line, and then it hit the stopwatch again when the tires hit the second line, and then it automatically will spit out a estimated speed, which is, and some plus or minus category, and then the officer can write a speeding ticket. Now, on that function, there are, I would not say that the entire Bureau of Police has been trained on that, but, if you're looking at stop signs, if you're looking at red light violations, any number of, no turn on red, those type of things, any officer, can easily enforce those types of laws.
Okay. And of course, we do have our red light camera stuff coming our way, which will be helpful. So I guess my challenge to you all is, and I love a post agenda, so I feel a post agenda coming on, but is to have. I would like to, and you can tell me how much time you would need, but I would love to have a post agenda with all of our commanders, including Commander Flesky with the Academy, to kind of hear hear what the plan is for both getting officers into our communities so that we're seeing those cars and and hear from the commanders about how they're going to make that work themselves in their own. Is that something we can talk offline? But
I'll try
3
to
months,
as many
2
commanders
months?
in here as you'd like. We'll bring the entire staff, and we can have that conversation.
Okay.
Again, like we do the best we can where we are with what we have.
I get that. And so, okay, so I'll sort of, I'll call for it, and we'll sort of shoot for maybe early in the year, something like that. Because that is definitely something that folks want, and we pay an awful lot of money for for law enforcement, and so I think making sure that getting these cars to drive more safely will make a lot of people happy. So thank you so much for everything you do. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Warwick. And let the record be shown we're joined by Councilwoman Deborah Gross and Councilwoman Teresa Kill-Smith. And before we move on to Councilwoman Gross, I just wanted to follow up on something that Councilwoman Warwick had brought up, competitive pay. Okay, we know we can't compete with certain municipalities. Some we can, most we can't. The bigger boroughs, bigger municipalities, they just pay better. So I know through just associations I have with chiefs throughout the place, throughout Allegheny County, that in order to retain, what we have is we have opportunity, meaning you can be a detective, you can become a sergeant, you can become a lieutenant, you can become a police chief or an acting police chief, whatever it might be, right? So I think that's kind of that's the carrot, to recruit people here. We're hopefully someday that trickle will stop as far as losing them to other departments. But I just wanted to your comment on anything as far as retaining our police officers. We can't do anything about the retirements, but it's the ones that are being recruited away. We can't really compete with pay to some of these boroughs, but it's the opportunity. And
we could if we quit giving so much money away. But go ahead.
Right. So did you speak to that at all? Does that help you in your recruitment efforts?
So as I think Councilman Mosley, I didn't actually hit the retention front, but I hit the recruitment front. Right. So I would tend to agree with you, Councilman, with respect to retention. We have certainly a number of opportunities that smaller agencies do not have, and we're blessed with that. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the ways is that you can be a bomb tech, you could be a SWAT operator, you could be a river rescue boat operator, you can be a mounted patrol officer, you can be a detective. You have a number of different opportunities that are not just there in the smaller agencies. What I will also say is that we also have to give those individuals, officers, detectives, and supervisors purpose. And we have to recognize the good work they do. And we have to let them know the difference that they actually make in their communities. Mm-hmm. And so that is one of the goals moving forward. I had a discussion with our command staff just yesterday about how do we do that, and how do we give individual officers like a snapshot of like, your work today, made a difference in someone's life. And, we operate in a city that, there are many individuals do not have a support system, and their first call and their last call are to 911. And that's because they don't have anyone else to turn to. And so I think it's about like, making them feel valued, making them feel respected, and recognizing the work that they do.
Right.
And, people leave, positions and go to different companies for all types of reasons. The last one, I don't want them to leave because they don't think their work here matters. And so that's a goal of mine.
Mm-hmm. Yep, thank you. And I will say, on a positive note, the retirements are outpacing the resignations this year. So that's a positive sign. And another perk to being employed by the city of Pittsburgh, lots been made of overtime and how much we spend there, and we're always going to have that. But you can make a lot of extra money in the city of Pittsburgh if you're hustling and you really want to make a lot of money doing overtime and detail work. So I think that's another perk. Plus, we give them and offer the best training, pretty much, I feel, in the country. We really are. I was at the training academy with Councilwoman Gross not too long ago, and I would tell you I was very, very impressed with the folks that are doing the training and the cadets that were there. So with that, I will turn the floor over to Councilwoman Gross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. I have been listening in from the beginning of the budget hearing, so I appreciate everybody's thoughtful answers and the questions from my colleagues. I'm just going to give some highlight reels from some discussions that I have every year at the budget hearings for the Police Bureau. So I have a couple of numbers in front of me, and it's back to this concept about the proportion of civilians to officers. A couple of years ago at the budget hearings, it's very small this year, but I kind of circled this whole I can't even read this really. I really squinted close to it. But it was bigger a couple of years ago on our handouts. And I was like, okay, so this whole kind of there's kind of almost 3 sets to the organizational chart. And I was like, gosh, all across here where it's like filing papers and answering the phone, this is where we could have a lot more civilians, right? And I do appreciate, I think, that the Bureau has been working towards that idea. And then I'm going to have to pull it up on my phone. That's where my cheat sheets are. Let's see if I still have this thing. We made a chart, and my colleagues have heard me read it, and probably some of you at the table, and you can look at previous years based on, it's getting older. It's like 10 years old now. It was a chart in Governing magazine, which we all read because it compares things about, especially a lot of local government stuff. And we pulled out, it was comparing police departments across the country in 2015 by how many employees they had per capita. So like how many employees in your police bureau per 10,000 citizens. And so we pulled out, as we usually do, our 15 benchmark cities. And I've been saying since then, and I've been saying at the time, that we're kind of on the upper end, even in the cities that we, like 14 cities we always compare ourselves to. We are way higher than someplace like Austin, Texas, where we're at in 2015, we were at like 28 officers per 10,000 people in the city. And Austin was only at 18. Again, but this is officers, not total employees, right? Charlotte, North Carolina, was only at 21 employees, or officers. And we were at 28. Indianapolis, only at 18 officers per 10,000 people. But then there were cities that were higher, and they were the kinds of, interestingly, kind of Rust Belt legacy cities like St. Louis, right? And this is 2015, before they've had so much trouble. 38 officers per 10,000 people, which is just way, way higher than us. So we were mid-range to the high end, certainly not the highest. But then there's also this idea of like, well, okay, so that's how many officers you have per capita, but you also have like a whole big bureau compared to that. And we have, bigger gaps. So like Charlotte has only 21 officers per 10,000 people, but 26 total employees per 10,000 people. Again, in 2018, Pittsburgh was like 28 and a half officers per 10,000 people and only 30 total employees. So you can see it's like around 90% of the whole police bureau were officers. And so we've been, again, this is kind of like highlight reels. I've been saying this a bunch. So one of the things I think that's interesting is that when we look at employees per 10,000 people, we had like 30 or so total employees in 2015. In 2021, we went up to 31 total employees per 10,000 people. And in 2025, we're only down to like 29. And then our officers, though, dropped from 28,000 per 10,000 people in 2015 to 26.7 for 2025 per 10,000 people. It's not a dramatic drop. But neither is that ratio. And we've really been talking about this ratio, and it was like 91% of the police bureau were officers in 2015, and your budget for 2025 shows 91%. But let's put that in context also, right? What we have added that we did not have in 2015 is something like 20 plus social workers, right? And I've probably should be able to remember this better because we did just talk about it this week, but it's been a very long week. It's more than 20 people in GVI. I forget what the full-time equivalent is.
Yeah, I believe it's close to 30.
30, right. And so while you don't see a bigger ratio of civilians really inside the police bureau for things like the telephones and the filing and things like that, and so I think I think there's still room there for cost savings because again, when you're not putting those people through the academy, they're on different kinds of pay scales. There's different costs associated with carrying them for pensions and insurance and things like that. But we have added, I think, a lot of capacity that I would suggest our residents asked us for. Right? Let's do more to invest in neighborhoods, not just in the capital budget with playgrounds, which we've also done a phenomenal amount, and we'll get to that in a different budget hearing, right? We've invested in recreation space. We've really improved staffing at Parks and Rec. We'd like to do more. And we've reopened pools. We've replaced and rebuilt and built new playgrounds, et cetera, et cetera. But then we've also added this capacity for co-response. We've added capacity for homeless outreach. We've added capacity where we felt that we wish we weren't paying for it. We wish the county had, 20 extra social workers running around the city doing the work that we're doing on our payroll. But we've added that capacity. And why am I bringing that up in the budget hearing? Well, it's part of public safety, but also, in addition to the telephone reporting unit, which is saving you half your call time, or I'm not saying that exactly right, technically right. Help me with how am I supposed to say it?
They take about 50% of our incident reports.
Right. Okay. So you don't have an officer kind of running out in their vehicle, on the bicycle, or in the car to get to a place and take a report they don't need to be in person to take. So you've saved that amount of hours of their shift. Then also, I think we've been talking about for years the goal of bringing down those, and I don't want this to be an insensitive way of saying it. I forget exactly how we talk about it. The high frequency callers. I didn't hear that talked about today. In investing in civilians in our Stop the Violence programs, and in investing in civilians in our OCHS social workers, do you see a relationship and kind of where we got those civilians in other parts of public safety? Are we seeing a decrease in the sworn officer time dealing with frequent callers and kind of recurring a few years ago, we were saying there are things that our residents need to be safe that police officers are not trained to provide.
Yes.
Okay.
We definitely see that with it was initially called the High Utilizer Program. Now we call it the PINS program, which is people in need of support, which has a component with OCHS in each of our bureaus of public safety, one of that being police. So when we have the high frequency callers between the PINS program and with police, it's typically more with the co-response team. They will respond, handle, and engage with that person to see what services they need to reduce the calls, reduce the need for emergency services or 911 calls, and rather get them on the path. Well, I can get you some of those statistics around that for each of the bureaus. The biggest decrease we have seen, I'll be honest, is fire for that specific program. And then co-response and PINS, we could get you the data for that for police calls as well, and of course EMS. But what we're seeing is, if you start to engage, get a unit like co-response, which is an officer and a social worker responding together, they sometimes will spend 2 hours with someone, making sure they're connected, getting them connected to services, taking to those services. And then they do case conferencing with our officers in those zones to then talk about that person and say, this is what happens with them. If you start to see this occurring, let us know so we can stop it ahead of time rather than waiting till there's 10 calls again. So with the expansion, I know this isn't in this budget, but with the expansion of the co-response program to the entire city, we expect to see even a more marked difference with that. So it is a matter of being proactive instead of reactive. I've said this all the time. Like, public safety is typically a very reactive planning, or a reactive model. I am trying to focus on us being, we're always going to have to be reactive. There's no question about that. But what can we do to be more proactive, to reduce that need for that reactionary time, for those 911 calls, for the things so then our officers, paramedics, firefighters can focus on those high priority, high need instances rather than lower instances that are more, some folks would call them nuisance, but they're more lower level that don't need that immediate response if we can maintain their needs better.
Right. So the people in need of support, the high frequency callers, would be people who were calling 911 themselves, right?
Yeah.
But there wasn't an active crime. They maybe not really truly are in a medical emergency either. Like, I did one ride along with EMS one time, and it was someone who they'd seen frequently, and they took her to the emergency room. There's not really anything wrong with her, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
We've heard testimony here at the table and previous post agendas about people using EMS almost as a taxi service. So I think we've made some headway there, right? And then I'm thinking with the GBI, with the OCHS, we may also be decreasing the amount of officer time that is utilized with people who other people call 911 about, right? And so, in community meetings, you may hear that there's someone, everybody knows who they are, but they're people in need of support, but they're not the ones calling 911 about themselves. It's other people calling 911 about them, right?
Right.
Some people call them vagrants, some people call them, panhandlers, or they're not really begging or doing anything, but they still are erratic or cause concern from residents, and residents are calling 911, right? And we didn't used to really have anything but the county to help that person through their behavioral problem, their addiction problem, their homelessness problem, whatever that problem was, right? And so I would suspect that by adding in so much capacity to OCHS and Stop the Violence, you would think hypothetically, but it's tough times, and we know that there's more and more people kind of not receiving the medicine or the treatment or the shelter that they need. So I don't know. Do you see any change? Are you kind of looking for change in that?
Change in
In decreasing the officer time spent on people who, while not actively engaged in a crime, other people are calling 911 about them.
I don't know.
Yeah,
It's a good question.
not
I
either.
don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a question we should ask ourselves, though, right? Because we did kind of sit here for many hours, many years ago, right, and not even that many years ago, and say, like, these are people who the officers, we're calling officers on them, and that's not really what the officers need, and is not what the people need. And so it feels like we've really, as the Bureau and as the council, kind of really staffed that up. And so it'd be another kind of thing to look at. I don't know how to capture those metrics. I can see Charles' eyes kind of calculating there. I don't know.
Unfortunately, I don't have any more to add to that.
Yeah, I'm just
it
kind
makes
of
sense.
Again, this is kind of like a highlight reel. It's like, okay, here's what we said we wanted to do. It's been a few years. We've done these things, right? And so hypothetically, we are using our officers' time for more of what they're trained to do. That's the goal. I don't know if you want to respond to that.
No, I think you're correct. When individuals become police officers, their goal is to help their communities, to make a difference, to help people. I think if you ask, the regular officer, he or she would say, I would much rather, catch the bank robber than, play the guidance counselor or, social worker. But we recognize that, our role has kind of, morphed into that role, and, we're certainly are grateful that there is individuals alongside us to help us in that endeavor.
Yeah, I think, and I even though we like to say we wish the county were paying for it, I also have longtime residents who tell me how their Parks and Rec building had counselors in them when they were kids, right? And that Parks and Rec building has been closed for 30 years. There's nobody in it. There's not kids in it, and there's not counselors in it. So it is some way coming full circle that we're kind of getting back to doing some things that maybe we'd forgotten about, or because of austerity we cut, we hadn't restored, and then we paid the price for that. So, there's some of that too. So it's an interesting. I think it's a valuable conversation, and that we need to keep having. I want to acknowledge, because I didn't do it I don't remember if I did it in the public safety budget hearing, acknowledge that there is a capital project for the firing range. And I really want to thank everybody. I think everybody here that's at the table and that's in the audience have been in repeated meetings about the firing range, in public meetings, in your offices, in my offices, in Councilman Coghill's offices, at alternate sites for the firing range, at the firing range. We've had many, many hours of time together over this issue, and it takes a lot of conversations to really understand what solutions are. So there's something like $4.5 million to minimize sound at either that site. We've looked at alternate sites. I don't know if you want to speak to that today, or kind of like, what do you see as the change? And again, this is about multiple things, right? The current firing range not only amplifies sound over to residential areas that it exceeds the decibel levels constantly, and thank you to the constituents who send us the readings from their phones and sound meters, that it's also not a great place for the employees who have to be there on a daily basis, or the recruits, right? I think there's a porta potty. And it's kind of in a not very fancy trailer. And that's about it. So I don't know if you want to kind of speak to how an improved firing range and sound minimizing will help.
Yeah, so if we are, this budget item is that if we are to remain where the current range is, because it is rather difficult to find a ideal spot in this city, and I know Director Hornstein's been diligently working with us on that as well, we will at least be able to put a significant sound dampening, I'm not sure the technical terms, but decrease the sound, which would minimize the impact to the neighborhoods around it. My understanding is by about 80%. So that should, help with a lot of that, as well as help clean it up, modernize it for the officers that utilize it, and potentially do some water mitigation work, which is obviously a big concern along the Washington Boulevard corridor. So we're happy to have this in the capital budget and proceed with DPW to figure out exactly what the best route and course of action is. And obviously we will keep yourself and Councilperson Coghill in the loop on all that. And I'm sure we'll have more meetings. But I feel like we're much further along than we have been in my time.
I do too. I'm really happy to see the item in the budget. So thank you all for really hearing about this issue and working on it. And I just want to acknowledge that I think I have 30 years of records from Highland Park neighborhood on this issue about conversations, prior studies, and prior attempts to have that kind of item in the budget. So this is the first time in 30 years that they've actually gotten some commitment from an administration. I'll put in just a little plug that, again, what has changed also in 30 years is that there is a Rails to Trails project happening that will connect Aspinwall to Frankstown Road and that railroad, long abandoned railroad that will be converted to basically a tourist Rails to Trails, is just a few feet from the firing range. So that's something for everyone to keep in mind. So that's one of the reasons why I appreciate Councilman Coghill taking time and looking at alternate sites and kind of convening everybody in the Bureau to do that this year. That was, I think, especially helpful. I think I covered all of my items, so I'll leave it there, Mr. Chair. Thank you all.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gross. And just to follow up on the firing range, if I may, a couple things that we had talked about previously, and we talked about suppressors for the high-powered rifles.
Did think of another one.
Did we actually acquire them? Did we get those or no?
Thank you for asking.
Yes,
Appreciate it.
you
'Cause
got
we've
it.
been tracking the sound reports that we get by time and date stamp into a spreadsheet and sharing the back out to the officer who's in charge of the range, whose name I always forget, and I apologize.
K?
Sergeant Woods.
Sergeant Woods.
Yeah.
And so that she has it and she can see, because she keeps very careful track exactly what weapons and ordnance she was using at what time, so that she can see if there's any pattern to discern and see if there's anything she can do about that. And then secondly, I know that she's been really helpful in establishing a schedule, but the schedule is not always perfectly adhered to. And I just had a really good suggestion that I think it's the first time in 30 years we've had this idea, especially since we all have mobile devices now. If she is doing something at the range that wasn't scheduled, or they're going overtime, or they're starting early, or there was some change, couldn't she just kind of send an email blast, like from her phone? Which is a great example, just to give people a heads up. I think that the residents would really appreciate that. That might be, not as easily said as done, but it maybe is a concept we could work on.
We'd certainly work with you on that.
Thank you.
So did we get suppressors? Or
Did we
no?
get the suppressors?
They're in process.
Oh, they are?
Awesome.
So they're like ordered?
That's amazing.
Not ordered yet.
Because I think, Deb, I can't remember who we talked to about it exactly, but I think they said that will cut the noise.
I think it was Sergeant Wood.
Yeah, and I think she said 50% it will cut. And we actually heard,
Yes.
remember they took
Yes.
shots with and without the suppressor. So that's a good start.
Yes.
Through this process with Councilwoman Gross, I did find out that it's not as easy just to find a new site, just to remediate the site we're on if we have to someday. That's very costly in its own right, not let alone finding a new site. But But yeah, I really appreciate your efforts, Councilwoman Gross, and I know it's very concerning to her district, as she pointed out, the trail coming in. And again, I'm not going to take much time because I'm just piggybacking on things that other
Too
ones,
late.
and we're going to end with Councilwoman Kill Smith. But as far as that site goes, we got $4.7 million in the budget. Is that and I understand the design is done.
Yeah.
Okay. And are we moving forward this year with that then?
As long as you all approve the 4.7, that is the intent, yes.
All right. Well, I don't think you'll have a problem at that end of the table or me, but yeah, that's good. So
Everybody looks at me.
no. Well, I think it'll be welcome news to District 7 and District 9 for that matter. I think the actual range is in District 9. So, okay, that's it, Councilwoman Gross. Okay, Councilwoman Kill Smith.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, you're welcome.
He's so knowledgeable, it's hard to even ask questions after going after him. I want to thank you all for your work and, again, offer my sympathies about the Assistant Fire Chief and condolences to him and his family and to all the Fire Bureau, all of public safety. With that said, I have a few questions, and I know that a lot of them have already been asked. For me, you know how I feel about the budget. The numbers are too low. I'm not comfortable with it. And I hear a lot of people saying all the great things that are happening in the city, but the reality is we have people living on the streets that don't feel that things are as safe as the rosy picture we're trying to paint here today. We have a lot of people in some of our neighborhoods that are seeing a lot of violence, and I think there's been a lot of in Sheridan in particular. There was two houses being shot up, one after another, almost it seems like weekly now. And people are living through this, and they just don't even, sometimes people aren't even calling 911. So I don't know how we're even collecting the data for some of these things, because I feel like people are so fed up with calling 911 and not having an officer show up. And I know that's part of some of the plan, and having, if there's something that we can do online or something. But this is Pittsburgh, and I know people came from outside of Pittsburgh and moved into Pittsburgh, but Pittsburghers, the majority of people lived here and grew up here and were raised, and they feel like things are changing in a way that they feel out of control. So what I want to do is whatever we're doing, whatever transition we're doing, we need to make sure that we're making people feel safe in the interim, and that they know that their safety is priority. So I don't feel comfortable with the staffing numbers. I'm not going to feel comfortable with these. I probably won't vote for the budget because of this. But I would like to know some questions about the police community relations and overtime pay and what we're doing. We used to do events a lot, and our officers showed up for everything. And now what a lot of our groups are getting is no response, or maybe one person, or things like that. Well, to me, those are things that help build police community relations. Do you have any idea how that might, with these low numbers, how that might be affected?
Well, I think our desire is to make every officer a community relations officer. So, as I kind of said before,
Does that start with the chief?
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. You tell me to be somewhere, I'm usually there. But what I'll say is that we've designated officers in those neighborhoods. It is my desire and the expectation that they know what's going on, and if there's something that's going on while they're working, that they should be there. That's the expectation.
And then, for me, what I see from that is that we have officers now working. Here's a question, actually. For the night watch this past weekend, there's usually 12 to 14 officers on the schedule with vacations and call-offs, there was no one available. The only way that they were staffed it was by holding officers overtime the PM shift. It was Saturday into Sunday, and officers are working an average of 55 to 60 hours per week. How do we think that that's not going to result in something really tragic happening? I want you to answer first, Director.
So I'm not aware of the specifics of that staffing for the weekend, but it is common for officers to work overtime. They work 410s. We expect the supervisors to be out there ensuring everyone's safe, that they're not overly tired. I rely on the command staff to let me know when there's issues around that. I think it's a matter of ensuring, again, that our officers, as part of the I know it's not always popular, but part of not having officers respond to every call and allowing supervisors to decide whether an officer needs to go in person or if it can be referred to the telephone reporting unit. So we're not running them ragged the entire time, so they don't have time. You know, if they're responding to a call that happened a few days ago, that could be a report online or a telephone report, they do that. They should also be, I agree with the chief, engaged in the community and out there. I think we need to make sure our officers feel supported, that the commanders feel supported, and I understand the staffing makes it much more difficult to do that. I think realistically, even with the recruitment strategies we have, and as we're recruiting when we see across the country, for us to get past or up to the 800 number this year, it was definitely not going to happen. Next year, I don't think it would be likely to happen, especially as I mentioned earlier, when you think through that they don't, the numbers of recruits don't hit that 800 number until their second year. So sorry, I know I went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but
Well, while you're talking about, could you also talk about the officers had their past days canceled, and they've been ordered to work light up night, even though it's non-emergency. What happens with the past days? How long are they canceled for? Do you know that?
well, I don't believe past days were canceled, correct?
No, they weren't canceled.
deviated.
They were shifted. So we deviated
What does that mean?
schedules. So past days canceled means if you have Thursday, Friday, Saturday off, I would cancel your past day and you only have Thursday, Friday. What we did is we shifted their past days. So instead of having Thursday, Friday, Saturday off, they have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday off.
Okay, I just want to be clear. This is actually coming from reporters, so they must be getting it from someone. And then the other thing I have is a little bit when we talk about police retention, and I heard you say about the way people are treated. And I'm just going to ask this question because it comes up a lot, and it's of you, acting chief. A lot of officers they feel like a lot of times you're trying to look for things to, discipline them, to do things to, put officers in a very difficult situation. They don't feel valued. They feel devalued. They feel a lot of times humiliated by some of the things happening. How do you plan on changing how you react and respond to officers as we're moving forward and realizing that retention is so important? Oh, I'm sorry. I just got a response that the union filed a grievance about the past days. So there is obviously something there. But let's go back to your. I'm going to give you a second. Do you want a second to think about that?
Well,
So let me just say this. One of the reasons I liked working with you when you were the commander in our area was because you were responsive and you did do things in the community that the community wanted to see done. So I did like that. But then what I'm hearing from other people is that same thing that I liked is not always great when you're leading other people who want to feel respected and valued. And so I don't know how that changes, how you can change that and what you intend to do differently to maybe retain officers.
So I think it's the same thing I said before, right? I'll give you an example of a phone call that I received yesterday from an individual who wants to come back to the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police. And he left to go to another job, another agency, local agency. And he called me up yesterday because I got his letter. And I called him and I said, I see you want to come back. And I said, tell me why you want to come back. And he said, because when I worked with the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police, I had purpose and I had value and I recognized the difference I make. And that resonates, right? And so, I believe we have to do a better job of recognizing good work. We have to do a better job of letting officers see that the difference they make in their community. So if I am assigned to, and I'll say just a neighborhood, if I am assigned to Sheridan, then I expect that officer to know the who, what, when, where, why in Sheridan. I also expect them to know what the statistics are in Sheridan. And so they know what difference they make. So if crime goes down, that should be celebrated and rewarded. And so those are the types of things from a culture standpoint that I wish to bring to the organization.
And I'll save the rest of the questions for that, if the time comes that we have, interviews and whatever. But for me, I just really want to know about the officers and how we're retaining them and keeping them here with, feeling valued, not just feeling beaten down and that they're not ready to go to another place, and not that somebody's not constantly looking over the shoulder for something wrong, but finding the right in what they're doing too. And I think that's important to everyone. And
Could I just add one thing regarding one of your previous questions? I know, and I've heard this too, around folks not calling 911. I would always highly encourage at any instance that folks call 911, because if we don't know about it, we can't do anything. I know they may get frustrated if an officer doesn't show up, but when that occurs, and I'm aware of it, and Chief's aware of it, we do review those cases to figure out exactly why an officer didn't show up, or why it took longer than it should have. But without the 911 call, we don't have those numbers to go that statistics to properly inform us as to where we should be staffing at. So,
okay, and then when you talk about cutting the budget down to 800, it equates to 150 supervisors compared to 650 officers, detectives, the boots on the ground. When fully staffed, that's 4 officers per supervisor. That's a great number if we can afford it. But if we can't, where are you looking that maybe would you rethink some of the structure of the police bureau and the lead, and how many officers you have in leadership versus how many are actually on the ground? I think you call a lieutenant executive is what somebody said, executive office, and not reducing the number of commanders and chiefs. Basically, why is there a commander at the academy now? And there's just a lot of staffing things. So are you looking for efficiencies and the structure of the department, moving, specialty deployment back into Zone 6, doing things like that make things more efficient? Are you looking into those things?
we are. Chief and I even had a conversation recently about specialty deployment back into Zone 6, as it was, years ago. And I think we do have to, as our numbers go down, and I've had this conversation with the union president as well, as the numbers go down, we do have to determine if the current span of control is appropriate for the force that we have, and if we would need to reduce, supervision or to ensure that the boots on the ground, so to speak, have the right number of people compared to the officers, but or compared to supervision.
So
but
can
I can
you?
talk to the chief.
I want to understand this because this is sent to me from other people. If you move somebody, if somebody's a lieutenant, or how do you move them? I don't understand how you move them down. Can you do that?
We wouldn't reduce. No, we would do it through attrition. So
Attrition. Okay.
if we decide we no longer need a sergeant in an area, it takes some time because of picks and everything else. Chief can probably talk to a little more than I can, but we would not eliminate or force anyone to take a demotion. That is not something that would ever occur.
Okay.
What it would be is, as a sergeant or lieutenant retires or resigns, or a commander, whatever it is, there's a backfill that occurs. We would make a decision, which we typically do frequently anyhow, whether we're going to fill that position or not. And there have been times we have eliminated that specific supervision position, and then it just doesn't get backfilled, or someone else gets moved from one to
Chief
another.
Ford to Crafton. What happens with that position? Are you going to fill that?
Yes. As of right now, we do plan to have 3 assistant chiefs.
Well, I think Councilman Colco and I are going to talk to you a little bit about the structure.
Okay.
And maybe Councilwoman Gross and Warwick, I don't know, after this meeting. But for me, I just really wanted to ask some of those questions about staffing and about retention. They're the most important things. And this overtime, and the police motorcycles, what is the status of those? Because I'm hearing so many different things. What is the status? Do we still have them, right?
Of course we have them.
But where are they?
They are dispersed amongst the zones. And so if I go back to Councilman Warwick's point about traffic enforcement and who are the subject matter experts in traffic enforcement, the cycle officers would be the experts in traffic enforcement. So having them dispersed amongst the zones, one, does a couple things, right? It allows us to, kind of be more proactive and more reactive to 311 complaints within certain neighborhoods. It also allows those officers to train the other officers in those zones on the best way to handle some of those traffic complaints. So I think it certainly benefits the neighborhoods, and it certainly benefits the officers that are in the zones.
And I know that Councilman Colco and I were just talking about homicides were up at a certain point, and it dropped down across the country, but he'll talk a little bit about that. But we do have a lot of increase in violent crimes in the city of Pittsburgh. And, I mean, who's working on, other than Stop the Violence, who's working on those kinds of things?
Well, I would say that violent crime is down, not up. Our shootings...
I think maybe reporting may be down. I don't think it's down because I'm getting the phone calls and I'm tracking too now.
It's tough to hide a gunshot wound, Councilwoman. What I'll say is that there's a 34% reduction in non-fatal shootings, 15% reduction in homicides. We work collectively together. It's a combination of
so non-fatal
officers.
shootings. I think people are getting shot, but our healthcare professionals are actually so great at it that they're not passing away. But go ahead.
Well, if you look at the difference, I'm not want to sparse in spar here, but if you look at between the homicides and non-fatal shootings, it's probably either tremendously great healthcare or the a centimeter here or a centimeter there. So if you take all of those numbers and you combine them, we're still like about 30% down from what we were the year before. But getting to your point on who handles those, we have a tremendous amount of effort by the uniform division, by our violence prevention officers who are out in the street, who get information from the relationships that they build within the community. And we also have do a great job of clearing some of those cases as well. And our outreach people are there. They're letting us know what is happening in the streets. Sometimes they get information that we don't, and it's a collective effort.
How many officers are in Zone 6 and Zone 3?
I don't have those numbers in front of me right now. I mean, I can get those numbers to you.
Yeah, I'll get them off the union. That's okay, thank you. And then I'm just going to say that I do have somebody who is collecting the data a different way, and she was actually a governor's director of data. So she's helping me try to figure out what exactly is going on, because I want to make sure whatever we're doing, we're spending the money in the right areas and the right things. And I actually do see these reach people. I told you this out in the community, and I hadn't seen them before, and now I see them, and I know they're a phone call away usually. But I do have a lot of young kids in Sheridan that need, some kind of, and in Elliott. I mean, it's going to cost us one way or the other. Like in Elliott, we had a lot of kids, and we put in $1 million playground in the playground. Everything in that playground in 1 year has been replaced. So one way or the other, it's going to cost us if we don't spend money. Who has the park rangers? Is that you? So could we maybe talk about maybe moving them around to places like in playgrounds? And I mean, it's great that they're with trees and great that they're talking to people and on trails, but the people that need them are in the park playgrounds and on the streets. And so I'd like to see them getting kids into doing activities, working with city parks and getting them into the playgrounds where they're actually working with kids and doing things that are really helpful to the kids in the community. So I would love for you to do that.
Yeah, so park rangers are split a little bit. Operation, they're under public safety mostly, but they do also report to Director Vargas. Budgetarily, all but 2 of them are under Director Vargas. I have 2 in my budget because most of the park ranger positions are grant funded or RAD funded.
By RAD funding, which
Yeah.
people think we don't get, but it actually helps our
Right.
parks. Because,
Yeah,
thank you,
so
Pete, for that information.
some of those have stipulations that ranger has to stay in that park because that's what it's paying for. But we did, Director Vargas and I have, like I said, we have a couple that are, and we did put in some requests for some folks that could go to different parts of the city. So I have the same thing. Like, I think we could do some of the programs even in a parklet, let kids come and families come to see the variety of programs that they do provide. in there. But those are park rangers are one area that we focus a lot with foundations and others to support those programs.
And then for Grandview Avenue, we get those phone calls constantly about the burnouts, the speeding on Grandview, the pedestrian issues that they're having up there, residents that have been physically attacked up there, and there's some amazing people that live in on the side streets as well, and they're also feeling some of the effect. There's never enough staffing to put somebody up there, on a regular basis. We know that, basically the times that some of these things are occurring. And I don't understand why we're not trying to do more. And this is Councilwoman Warwick really talks a lot about this, pedestrian safety. Well, this is one of those things. We have somebody doing a burnout, and I think at one point they knocked over a street light, which could have really taken out anybody, including pedestrians. And so I know that we can't chase people, but are there other things that we can do? And I'm not going to take this up because it's the budget season, but budget talks, but is there something we can do to afford putting something or someone there more frequently? I know we did a camera there, and I thank you for that. We did a camera there. But I know that Commander Abrams is struggling to get, because he also has a south side. So he also has a south side, and so I think that he has some challenges with his staffing there as well. Is there any plans for other than the camera in the budget?
Budgetarily, I'm not sure that there's anything that we, not specifically for there.
Additional cameras, anything like that across the
We
city?
do have some additional cameras in the budget, but that's not, not specifically for there. It's for all over the city, so we'll look at all those options. I do
I mean, it's at the point I'm going up there and sending them home. I mean, it's ridiculous.
but we
They go home
are,
too. They do.
I have had a lot of discussions with Commander Abraham. I'm assuming the chief has as well, but we do have some thoughts and ideas, and I know some community members frequently email.
There's a meeting tonight.
Yeah, and we do have some thoughts around what else we could do to reduce that and change things there, but obviously we can talk about that
Yeah.
offline here. But
Because it's not just an issue there, it's an issue in Sheridan, it's an issue across the city, but I think somebody's going to, 3 people already were hurt, I think killed, and so I think some of them were the cyclists that were racing up there. Well, I think one was by the 10th Street Bridge. But it's from the same group. But there's also a group of kids that like to do some of the stuff in Westwood, and I went down, I met with those kids too. They're actually helping me now, doing some other things, getting them redirected into some other things. But I think in terms of the budget, I think I would like to see not only just cameras, but what other maybe obstacles or barriers, something, road construction, something that you can do that would deter that at certain hours, that's all. Or an officer that's there, like a detail. I used to pay details out of my budget to stay up on Grandview, and now we don't even have the officers to do that anymore. So I just want some thought given to that in the budget. Thank you. Sorry, thank you. I could go on forever. I have a whole page, but I thought I'm going to give.
We'll have many conversations.
I'm going to
around
give
all the
Acting
subjects
Chief
you just
Ragland a
brought
break
up.
right now.
No, thank you,
Go
Councilwoman
crazy.
Kill Smith, and so.
And Director, because can I just say this real quick?
Yeah.
Thank you for always taking our calls and for always remembering that you work for not just the administration, but also for City Council and for the people of Pittsburgh mostly. Thank you.
Yep, I'll echo that. I don't have much. Everybody covered mostly everything I was going to ask, but I wanted to say, Deb pointed this out. Who prints your papers? I mean, either we're getting a lot older, or the printing's getting smaller. I don't know what it is. I can't with a magnifying glass.
we're
I can't
trying to
see this.
conserve paper. We
Budget-
can make sure.
budget.
Yeah, Charles sends it to
He's
us.
doing
and
a
we're-
great.
yeah.
You're doing a great job, though.
Why, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know it was. Yeah, it was you, Peter.
Kirsten
I
is
was gonna
doing an
blame
excellent
somebody from
job.
the Bureau.
No, that's on me.
That's
That's
from
on
within
me.
council
Yeah.
then. Okay, forget about that question. But yeah, we need a bigger print. But okay, so thank you.
We'll try to use a bigger font next time.
So, okay, well, I'm going to begin with Acting Chief Ragland. So here's what I want to know from you, Chief. What do you see the number being at for the Pittsburgh Police Department, providing we had everybody? What's the correct number for you?
That's a sort of a loaded question, Councilman. There's been any number of studies out there, right? Like, if you look at the matrix study, which I think I would be against and mostly everybody else would be against, the number's one thing. I think what you get down to is what do you want to accomplish, and how robust do you want the services to be? You know, if you want to go back to cutting our telephone reporting unit and everybody who calls 911 gets an officer, that number is going to be well over 1,000. If you want to do some other things, you want to find a happy medium, that number's somewhere in between. I think we certainly, again, like, my desire is to have as many officers in the neighborhood as possible. I am happy to have that discussion on what that looks like with this group and what you and your constituents want out of your police force.
Okay, the reason why I'm asking you that is because, we went from 900 budgeted to 850. We went from 850 to 800. I know this is not the case, but what I hear in the community is, why are they defunding the police? And I'm like, they're not defunding the police. We just don't want to tie that money up when we know realistically we can't get those officers.
Well,
and it's going to be years.
We are defunding them, but go ahead.
Well,
We're dismantling them.
So to that, here's what I want to say. In my neighborhoods, we've had a rash of automobile break-ins, a rash of them. A lot of them are caught on the Ring doorbells. They're calling 911, and they're not getting a police officer there. Is that our policy now? Is it just calling these in? I mean,
I'm sorry. So, what kind of break-ins you're saying? Car break-ins?
Yeah.
All right. So in that instance, that's going to be probably a telephone reporting unit. However, if you have video, we have the capability of sending out, basically a link where they can then upload that video. And what we do is take the report over the phone, look at the video, send it to the commander, who then kind of sends it to these detectives to kind of look into it. If we can solve that, we will solve that. There's nobody saying, we're not going to solve burglaries, or we're not going to solve car theft, break-ins. If there is a tangible ability for us to investigate and bring someone to justice for doing that, we most certainly will.
Right. So, I will say this: there's a comfort level of seeing a police officer come to your house when you had somebody violate and break into your automobile. And they're breaking into many streets have been hit all at once, 4 or 5 of them, neighbors out in the streets saying, "You get break into?" "Yeah, I got broken into." So I do not like that policy. I know. So it's a lack of police officers is why we went to a call-in system. Is that right?
Well, I don't think it's a lack. I think it's using resources in a different way. And, if there's any, if the crime is in progress, if you come home and your door's kicked open, there's going to be police officers there. If you parked your car somewhere, came back to it 4 days later and it's broken into, that's going to be a telephone reporting unit. And, that doesn't mean we don't investigate that or we give that less time or effort. It's just a simple fact of I don't have to send an officer out to that location, get your information, then have that officer, because we do not have, cell phones for everybody. We don't have a reporting system platform that allows the officer to do that report on a mobile device. He or she would then have to drive back to the station. Just not a truly efficient use of resources. However, if you're sitting here today and telling me that everyone here on council wants that and your constituents wants that, then we'll rethink our budgeted number, and then we have to have a conversation on how do we fund that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know the reality of it. A police officer comes out, takes the report, and it's really more for the insurance company as much as anything, right? We know person's long gone at the time. I think there's a comfort level my district needs to see. I will tell you, as we scatter police all over the city of Pittsburgh, whether it be in the south side, up, the efforts we put in there. I have people in Brookline and Overbrook that are like, can you believe a police officer didn't come because of, where we have this person on camera, they feel like it's just, being left on. And I understand the insurance companies are requiring a police report. So how do we get them the report that they necessarily need?
Well, maybe we need to do a better job of educating the public. And again, I'm always about providing more information than less. And so if we're falling short in that category, again, like we can obviously work on that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I personally think the amount of police officers, and you all know better than me, but I think 900 is a number we need to try to strive for and get to. And if that means we can respond to still car break-ins, that's all the better. I just need enough police, at least in my district. I want them to respond to car break-ins. I really do. Even if it's just for 5 minutes, they just need to see a police officer, I feel. I don't want that police officer being tied up there for an hour. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm just looking for the presence of the police officer. And maybe we can get, somebody from Stop the Violence to come take reports. I don't know. Is that possible? Can we not train somebody else to come out, have the police officer show up, say, don't worry, man, we're on it, and then somebody else take the report for the insurance company?
No, that would actually be a violation of contract in person anyhow. I want to clarify, though, the telephone reporting unit takes full legitimate police reports. There is no difference between the police report that an officer responds to a scene or the telephone reporting unit. It's the same report. You would still have access to that to your insurance. It's just how the information is acquired, whether that's in person through an officer or over the phone or through digital means, as the chief mentioned.
Right.
So there's always an official police report using the same reporting system.
Right. So here's another thing. I don't want to sound like a pessimist, but I know that we are touting that the murder rate has gone down 15% over the last 2 years or so. You could look through any major city and they'll have the same figure, okay? I'd like to believe it's our OCHS, it's Stop the Violence Fund that's helping to create that number to go down. But I think in reality, it's, coming out of COVID, everybody was just bonkers. And you see the rates were up in every major city, and now the rates are back down in every major city. I believe we've done a good job in administering, our social workers. And I particularly like Stop the Violence. I like what they do. I like to think they reach younger kids that, before they decide to make that bad decision, that they intervene there. But, and I'm not suggesting that our department hasn't done great work to curb that violence. And I just don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, because I've seen it many times in many police departments. It's almost waves, trends, So I think we're going in the right direction. But if you want to comment on that at all, please.
Well, I think if you ask any police officer, they're very reluctant to take credit for declines, because then they take the blame for when it increases. I think our men and women do a very good job of being responsive to the community's needs, and as long as I sit in this seat, they will continue to do so and build those partnerships.
Mm-hmm. Councilwoman McKeel-Smith mentioned the motorcycle units. I happen to think the best PR for our department was, the only one I've seen do it was Commander Ripple. Okay, I was at her Easter egg hunt, and there must have been 100 kids lined up with their parents looking for a ride in his little sidecar. We've discontinued that, right?
Discontinued what? The sidecars?
Well, not the sidecars, but the aspect of just engaging with parents and kids and being at events and just showing them that the police are good people, and it just sets an impression for these young kids, I think, that we've lost, because from what I know, Ripple doesn't do that anymore, does he?
As a commander, no. I mean, I think officers
Be careful
would
what
be
you
allowed
say,
to
because
do
I'm
it.
going to respond back.
Go
ahead.
I'm not saying commanders shouldn't engage in.
He did that as a
but
commander.
He
was
did
a
that when
commander
he was
doing
in the
that.
cycle unit, right? But I think there's also other officers that could do that as well. I mean, I have seen a few others do it. So it's a matter
Yeah,
of
he trained them
comfortability.
some well.
Right, he did. He is still a trainer for the cycles.
But you can tell that there's a lot of tension every time we bring his name up with this whole team. Go ahead. I'll count a second round. Thank you.
But there's no reason we can't do that. Those cycles are now in the zones. The commander would be the one who would send them to a community.
So
event in
we
their
still
zone.
offer it?
The cycles?
Well,
Or the ride?
the
The
rides.
ride thing was never I know it occurred, but it was never something that was signed off by law or insurance liability. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not saying they couldn't do it, but I also don't know that I can go on the record saying it's okay. I think there's safety precautions that would have to be taken and talked about. That's all I can say about it. I was there actually at the egg hunt last year. I was there myself and witnessed it, and I've witnessed it at many other events. I think it is a great way to engage. Even just having the cycles there in general, the kids like to sit in them, look at them, all that. There's no reason the cycles can't go to events, and I think Chief could follow up more, but
No, that's the expectation. That's
Yeah.
why I have individuals assigned to specific neighborhoods, so that they are there, when they are there, they are working, they can go to those events.
And you'll permit them to give the kids rides?
Well, I think we, again, like,
I know,
if we're
I
talking
know what
about,
the director
putting,
did.
putting a kid in a
Providing we meet the
sidecar.
safety, providing we meet what the director is concerned about.
Yeah, that'd be my concern as well. I
So,
truly
I'm
don't
tell-
want to put the city at any
It's the best
financial risk.
PR that we have between police officers and children and families, for that matter. So I would like to see that
I can feel my blood
continue.
boiling. You better move the conversation.
All right, and just so we know, okay, I always like to go over the numbers. Since 2023, January 2023, not even 2 years, we have lost 178 police officers. So I'm happy and glad that we have the academies back, and I know we're gaining, a certain number every year, but we're still not keeping up with what we're losing, and that trend I think is going to continue. I can't imagine that we'll ever get to even 800, let alone 900, that I think is right for the force. Want to comment on that?
Certainly, we want to kind of at least get to our budgeted number. I will say, though, that some of the retirements, this contract provided a double longevity that went towards your pension. So, in essence, like, there was some incentive for you to retire in that group. And then I think what you'll see next year is, like, even more may take that opportunity up if for fear that clause in that contract would come out. And so I think it's important if that we want to continue in that route, to make it known that, like, that isn't going away, because you will have individuals take that option because of fear of losing it.
Yeah. Well, I hope that trend, and again, I will say for this year's numbers, we've lost more to retirement than resignations, which is a positive sign. Maybe all the other departments around us are just full. We filled them up over the past 5 or 6 years, and they don't have room. So
We have had 5 or 6 come back. We just, I think.
Do we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The grass isn't always greener on the other side.
I agree. And basically, as I was saying before, when you decide to sign on with Mount Pleasant or Monroeville, you're basically a patrol officer, and there's not the opportunity that we have here in the city of Pittsburgh. So, and hopefully we get the pay scale up to, at least be a little more. I think we've done a good job. I mean, was it just last year we increased the pay across the board? So I think that was also helpful in retaining our police officers. So the shot spotter's up in Carrick. It's up and running. Councilwoman Warwick mentioned it. I asked you the other day if we had numbers, or if do we know, has it been triggered once, twice, 10 times at all?
I'm getting that report for you.
Okay. Good. Vehicles. What's going on with our vehicles? Do we have enough? Are they in good enough shape?
Yeah, there's been quite a few purchases.
Yeah, I know we made some acquisitions a couple years ago.
Yeah, so we're in the process of upfitting them, taking the old ones off the road,
Right.
putting new ones out. So
Right.
you know, that I think we're in better shape than we had been in years past.
Yeah, because no other department beats their vehicles like the police department. I mean, they're running 24/7 basically. So what you picture a normal vehicle the last maybe 7, 8, 10 years, our vehicles have a life shelf of probably 4 or 5. So vehicles aren't an issue for you at this time. You don't get complaints about vehicles broken down or not available.
We still have an older group of vehicles on the street
Right.
as we continue to kind of upfit the new ones to replace those. So it is a lengthy process.
Right.
Yeah. If I could just add, I mean, in the current state, we have most of our vehicles functioning, but we have it's because of the amount of vehicles that we didn't have for so many years that we're getting caught up.
Mm-hmm.
I would caution the city to make sure we don't continue that process of waiting, because that's where we are with most of the bureaus. We wait, we get a bunch of money, we buy a bunch of vehicles, and then all those same vehicles end up too old,
Yeah, we need to stagger 'em. I
unrepairable.
get it.
Right.
Yeah,
We need
right.
to spread that out. So don't take this as an opportunity to say, oh, we don't need any police cars for a while. We need to make sure we're balancing that and maintaining that fleet. Right now, the amount of vehicles we have coming in is hard for us to even, not just us, but our upfitter more so, getting them all upfitted and ready to go. That the amount of vehicles we have, it's going to take us a few months for the amount of vehicles we have delivered to the dealer for them to get upfitted and in service. So we need to catch up, but we also don't want to necessarily slow down on the purchase.
Okay. In Acting Chief Ragland, I don't know if I got a firm answer from you. I think I did, but refresh me. If we decide, or if I decide for my district, or however it might be, that I want police officers showing up on auto break-ins, you're going to send somebody there?
Well, I think that there is certainly opportunity for us to have a conversation about that and what that looks like. And I think if we want to have a longer conversation as to how we educate the public on that, I think we can. So yeah, I don't think it's a yes or no question. I think it's like if it's somebody's actively breaking in the car, you're going to see a police officer.
Actively, but it's very seldom is it actively. I mean, they come out.
We get people all the time that call about people trying car doors and things of that nature. And
Right.
you're going to have
So
a
you'll
dispatch
commit
car.
to being open to that, and we'll figure out how to do it. I don't care if it's by I just want it in my district, okay? If everybody else is fine
you
with
have
it,
in
it
your
doesn't matter.
district, and everybody else wants it in their district.
I know,
so-
but my district, forces are being spread throughout the city for legitimate reasons, bigger entertainment districts and things that need more police. And when we don't get a police officer responding to an auto theft, it sends their blood boiling, right? They're like, well, we don't get any attention over here, and we can't even get an officer to respond to a break-in. So I would like to see that in my district, even if we have to curb it, whereas the police officer shows up, spend 10 minutes there, that's all. Let them know we got it, call the report in then, that's fine. I don't want to waste the officers, we don't have it, to put them there for an hour speaking to and, going over all the details of what they took and what they didn't. I just want them to see a police officer, that's all.
So what I'll tell you, Councilman, is that I'm always happy to have a conversation and find some sort of compromise that works for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
What I will also tell you is that I certainly don't think you want someone to sit in this seat and tell you something that is going to be patently false,
Right.
or something that you want to hear that they don't intend to follow through with. I'm not that individual.
I appreciate your
And
honesty,
so
and I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
So that's how it's gonna. That's how it'll be.
Understood.
I always give you things. I'm happy to work, and I'm happy to compromise.
Understood.
But I'm not gonna sit here and lie to you.
Okay, understood. Okay, well, listen, I pretty much covered everything. I don't even want to get into Chief and what happened there and all that stuff. That's for another time. We'll do that behind closed doors and what direction we're going in from there. But I know other members had second rounds, so I want to just go back right into. I believe Councilwoman Warwick had. So Councilwoman Warwick.
Yeah, so just really quickly, just in terms of, just because when it comes to the car break-ins, because I've had that too, right? I've had that in Lincoln Place, where, folks have had their car break in, and also actually in the Run where I live too, where people come and try and lock. Some guy apparently, was sitting in my van the other night, which my neighbor told me. Anyway, I think, and maybe Councilman Coghill, this can be part of the compromise, is if we had those patrols, right? If we had those cars coming through on a more regular basis, right? Like through, like officers in the cars moving around the neighborhoods,
We've had that.
then you wouldn't have those types of break-ins so much, right? Because you never know. But if you feel like, well, it's not like, I live in the Run, it's sort of like a cul-de-sac, and if a patrol car never comes through, then it's, you know what I mean? That's just a thought that I have, that maybe that is if people are seeing officers out there just as a matter of course, then there will be fewer break-ins, and then, and actually someone more local who can more quickly respond to, oh, there's a guy coming down, there's a guy coming down checking, trying doors and whatever, then someone would be there more quickly. So maybe that is the way to kind of resolve that without having the, we can also do the telephone for the morning after break-in where you're like, well, there's nothing we can do here other than take a report and maybe upload some video footage. So that's just a thought there. In terms of just sort of and I know that, because I hear I hear too, like, oh, crime is crazy, and it's a crazy world out there. I do want to just say from one of my communities, that's the Hazelwood community, and this is a conversation I've had numerous times with community leaders, and I do think it's important. And this isn't about this year or last year, right? This is just overall. I know community leaders in that community are incredibly proud of the reduction in crime. And again, I didn't live here in the 90s, but from what I understand from our, church leaders, community program leaders, after school program leaders, that, back in the 90s in Hazelwood, it was very, there were like shootings regularly on the, and last summer, I think we had, I want to say maybe 3. This summer, I think we had 0. I'm not sure. And I understand that's never like a straight line. And a lot of that has to do, by the way, with the work that is being done in the communities by community leaders, right? It's not just police. I had never actually heard that idea that like law enforcement hesitates to take credit when crime goes down because they don't want to get blamed when crime goes up. That's interesting. Because that's always been a little bit baffling to me, that we have this drop and there seems to be a hesitation, for me coming in as a new council person who, as I said before, sort of skeptical of law enforcement when I came in, and I've come in and I'm like, wow, this law enforcement agency is great. Like, they're doing all this good work. I'm so impressed. But the folks who kind of are sort of the more traditional kind of like, advocates are the ones that are the more skeptical about the drops in crime. So that is an interesting, notion that hadn't occurred to me, right? It's like, well, we hesitate to take credit because, if things turn the other way, we don't want to get blamed. So that's, I appreciate that. Just a reminder for, folks calling 911. I say that all the time, right? At community meetings, like, call 911. There's often a hesitancy, like, oh, I don't want to bother people. Oh, maybe it's not an emergency. But also calling 911 is not necessarily going to be the police. It's going to be whatever one of our bureaus needs to respond to the thing that you're calling about, right? Maybe it's OCHS, maybe it's fire, maybe it's paramedics, maybe it's police, maybe it's a combination. But that is what it is there for, and that's how we record the numbers. And then the last thing I wanted to say is regard to sort of officer appreciation. That is so important. It is so important for people. It's for everybody in any job across the city. I love when people email us and say, oh, hey, this DP, whatever, you know what I mean? I love that. I always try and forward those on. But just as a reminder to the public on the Pittsburgh, so if you go to the city website for police on the Pittsburgh Police Cares, there is actually a link where you can click on there and write a compliment for an officer. So if you have had a nice interaction with a Pittsburgh police officer, just as a member of the public, you can log in there and send a direct message, and I assume those messages get relayed both to the commander and the officer.
Yeah, that's certainly one of the things I want to capitalize on. Like in the past, the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police and all police agencies, they would track, stats, number of traffic stops, number of arrests. They never tracked, there's all kinds of great police work that gets done that doesn't fall into a statistical column. And so, what I have tried the last, 3, 4, 5 years is figuring out how do we capture that. And there's, I'm not going to mention a name, but I know there's an officer there who, he doesn't lead the station in arrests, doesn't lead the station in traffic stops, but when there is a call, I know that officer will handle that call appropriately. He will make the people that he encounters feel valued. He will answer their questions, and he will do everything he can to help that person. The struggle for us is how do we recognize that? And I have some ideas that I'm happy to share at a future meeting, but that's what I'm trying to capture, the things that do not fall into a statistical column, and reward the work that gets done every day by people that just, giving those community people the opportunity to kind of say, hey, I appreciated him. He truly helped me out, or she helped me out. So those are the things that, as long as I sit here, is that we're going to move forward and try to capture.
Great, thank you. Well, I do need to run, and I just, one last note, to Councilwoman Smith's point, my son did that sidecar ride and he loved it. He loved it. It is fun. It is a lot of fun. So, at any rate, sanctioned, unsanctioned, it's definitely a good time. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilwoman Warwick. I know, Councilwoman Kill-Smith, you had second round, correct?
Well, I'm trying to.
Or do you want me to wait and save you for last?
No. Because if I sit here any longer, my heart's going to just keep.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Oh, is Councilperson
Yeah, you want to go to him first? He's online. Okay, Councilman Charland, do you have more questions for second round? You there? Bobby?
Yeah, I'm good. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilwoman Kill-Smith?
Okay, it's me again. Lucky you guys. I'm going to say that I do feel like there's a lot of tension here anytime I bring up somebody that you don't really like or don't really want to work with. And you can say that there's not, but when I watch your reaction, I see it. And I'm thinking, if I'm seeing that, I'm a council person who's going to vote on your position and have influence on this council, then I wonder what officers are feeling. So I just want to be very clear. I feel it, I see it, and I'm watching it across the board here. And I think that some of that comes because you have some issues, because he expresses his feelings a lot and his opinions a lot. What I'm going to say is that, as Councilwoman Warwick mentioned, he's a great officer. And if you knew what you were doing, you would do more to engage officers like him and to make them feel part of this team. And so with that said, I think that we're talking about all the different response times. We're talking about what people want to see. There's a transition going on in the city, and we're seeing newer, younger people getting involved and coming here. But there's still a lot of older people in the city of Pittsburgh who are accustomed to seeing people. The other day, we saw a meeting on TV, I think it was Councilwoman Gross's district, where they were so angry because police officers were not addressing things. Can I just say this? I don't think it's the police officers' fault. I think it's the police officers. I saw you. I think it's the police officers' fault. I don't think it's police officers' fault. I think that they are doing what the policy is and responding the way a policy wants you to respond. And yet, unfortunately, they sit there and they take the beating at every meeting, at every time, and sometimes it's us that need to change the policy. And I think council and the administration, we need to start talking to our residents, because we are here to represent them, not what we want and not what we see as the vision, but what they want us to do. And so for that said, I think that we need to look at more ways to engage and to transfer and to change over to some of the things that, other people might want to see. But what we're hearing is overall, the bottom line is people want to feel safe. They don't care. I mean, here I have something where there was the response times were in excess of 20 minutes twice for burglaries in progress within school buildings or within schools. One at 7 p.m., one at 9 a.m. And staffing's more severe at night, and there's waiting lists for calls to be handled. Placing civilians in the zone stations may be in a potentially dangerous situation, and not having armed individuals to de-escalate situations could be problematic in the zones. The violent situations arises, and when violent situations arises, many child custody switches occur at the zone stations, and people have to go to the station, and that's usually where somebody has to de-escalate those situations. So, I mean, there's all kinds of things that people are sending us that we can respond to. And what is the status of the record management? How do I put that one back up? What's the status of the record management system that's required for providing information to the FBI on criminal statistics? Do we know what that is?
That is up and running, but it is a county project. We are working with them to make sure that information is getting uploaded properly.
Was it always their county project, or was that something we just changed?
That has been a project that has been it started before I started with the city. It took us until last year to finally get it launched. Okay. Under the leadership of Chief Scarrato and Chief Ragland.
Are we in compliance, or are we past the deadline?
We were past the deadline because it took, again, it's a county project. I'm meeting with them on a regular basis. It is not just us, it's any department in the county that's utilizing that system, including county police. I just met with Chief Brown about that last week. We do have some concerns which we've addressed with him.
Look,
and if we do not get results from the county in a short time, we will be moving on to our own system because we're not waiting for that. I would want to point out something you mentioned earlier, and as even Chief Ragland was talking, I have an 82-year-old mother, and as he was talking about, if we call the telephone reporting unit and we'll send you a link to upload your photos, videos, whatever, my 82-year-old mother would have no idea what a link even is. So it made me realize I do think we need to look at how we're handling this. As the chief said, maybe we need to do not only some public education, but officer education. Maybe it can't be a blanket thing. Maybe it has to be, are you comfortable with the telephone reporting, or would you like an officer in person or online reporting as we make this transition? Because there are some people it will work fine for. I know some people have asked me for it because they don't want to have to wait for an officer to show up. They would rather go online, type it up, send it, because then they get the report for the insurance.
That's me.
But other people aren't that way. Like I said, I know my mother wouldn't be able to go online and type up a report.
Right.
So how do we find that medium? How do we make sure we're serving all of our residents in a way? And I think that's more discussion to be had.
Thank you for acknowledging that. And I do want to say, I think we should also do more to reach our immigrant community. And I do like the QR codes because it gives you so much information. And I love those brochure, those door knockers or whatever that they're handing out. People in the community seem to really appreciate them. But I do know in Chartier City, they're always asking about their officers. They want to see them more often. And the commander and the community officer, they're always there at the meetings. But I mean, I think he's going during his off hours. And I don't know about the others. But I think that people do want to see them, and some people want to see them all the time. I'm not one of the. I'd rather do it, online. But my mother's 103, so she's not doing it online. Okay, so, God help us if she does get online. But anyway, but I want to say that I think that moving forward, I think part of what we're having issues with the police department is there's always a challenge. There's always a division there. And it always seems to me that there's a way to bring those groups together. And it's by sharing responsibilities and a lot of mutual respect, and trying to make sure that we're trying to hold people there. And at the same time, we're trying to make sure that we're keeping people safe. I think efficiency and effectiveness have to go hand in hand. So I hope that we look at some more of the budget and see where we can make some changes and make some arrangements for some different things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Gross, did you have anything for second round?
Thank you. I do just want to give a shout out to to Zone 5, who showed up to a meeting in Bloomfield last week to have a very lengthy debate and spent an hour, Lieutenant Cunningham especially, spent an hour and a half continuously doing questions and answers with a very full room. And we really appreciate that kind of attention. And I am recalling a very specific concern from one constituent who called 911 and didn't get an answer. 911 didn't answer her call for 15 minutes.
They didn't pick up?
Yeah. So that's something I'd like to follow up on. I'd like to see if that's a pattern. It's deeply concerning. It was a health issue. A senior had fallen down their stairs. And then after she finally connected with 911, it did take, I think, another, I don't want to misspeak because I don't want to make anyone mad, but it did take another increment of time before paramedics showed up. And it was very distressing.
Yeah, if you can get me the details, I'll work with the county, because I think most folks know we don't run the 911 system, the county does, so I would have to work with them to research what all occurred, get the full timeline and details, and then follow up with you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. There, of course, were a handful of people who had or had vehicles stolen. And that was, I think, Lieutenant Cunningham spoke to that, but we'd like to see some follow-up and see how that investigation's going. There were a lot of circumstances where, of course, the lieutenant had to say that's an ongoing investigation. So I know that you cannot, I'm not asking you to speak to it here, and he wasn't able to speak to it live at the meeting, but that we are just asking for kind of progress reports. And then, of course, there's also the kind of package theft from porches, right? It's even easier in a neighborhood where the porch is like within an arm's reach of the sidewalk where you're walking by. That's, even easier. And we encourage people to send in their video. So thank you to Zone 5 and to the Bureau for piloting kind of the online submission of those your Ring camera videos and other video, whether it's from your phone or from your Ring cameras. We know, and I said this at that very long meeting, that we know that we have caught the people stealing packages from those kinds of videos. And but previously you kind of had to do it in person to get the video into the police hands, right? And so piloting in Zone 5, this online submission, I'm really eager to see how that turns out. And we do have, I'm not also going to speak, but I am fairly confident in saying that 70% of the population of Ward 8 is under the age of 40, right? And so these are very high-tech, very comfortable people. That's not everybody. And so we will make sure that everybody is comfortable with the technology or has another way of submitting those kinds of video or other kinds of photos and things like that, if it's helpful. God knows, I know they can post them on social media, and we're asking them not to do that. So if they can post them on social media, I think they can post them to the police office or the police bureau directly. So I appreciate that. So I just wanted to have those follow-up questions. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gross. And I don't think, do we have anybody online still? I know. Councilman Charlin, last opportunity in case you changed your mind.
Yeah, the only thing that I would say is just, and I mentioned this to the chief. We are very, very lucky in Zone 3 to have Commander Abraham. And, I just cannot sing his praises enough. The only way I want to see Commander Abraham moved is with a promotion here. So please do not take him away from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. And with that, I don't really have anything further. I know it's been an incredibly stressful 24 hours for you, Director, and for the Fire Bureau and for the city as well with the loss of, Battalion Chief John Walsh. I just want to ask everybody keep him to keep his family in our prayers. And any notice of service or anything, we'll make sure that members and, the community gets. So with that, I'm just going to take a motion to recess.
So moved.
Second.